East Gippsland Shire Council's meeting of the 15th of August 2023. The East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public. During the meeting, any members of the public who are addressing the Council will have their image and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the Chair. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend council meetings electronically or in person, and the meetings will be open to the public via live streaming. Members of the public are invited to view the live streamed council meetings by following the link on the council's website or Facebook page. If council encounters technical difficulties with live streaming during the meeting, we will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If technical issues can't be resolved, the meeting may be postponed to a later time or date. East Gippsland Shire Council acknowledges the Gunai, Kaurni, Monaro and Bidawal people as the traditional custodians of the land that encompasses East Gippsland Shire and their enduring relationship with country. The traditional custodians have cared and nurtured for East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders past, present and future. As I start tonight's meeting, I would like to pass on our thoughts to the people of Maui in Hawaii who are currently experiencing the sort of devastation that we had in 2019. And I think that, we know what it's like, and until you've been there, you can't know what it's like. So I just send out our thoughts to them. And I would also like to acknowledge, somewhere in the crowd, I haven't got my glasses on to pick him out, but I do believe that we have our ex-councillor and Mayor, Peter Neal, in attendance. So there he is, I can see him now. Good on you, Peter. So on to the next bit. A member's attendance can only be recorded as present at the council meeting when the member can confirm that they meet all of these criteria. They can hear the proceedings, they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members, and they can be heard. I will now confirm with each councillor in turn that they can see, hear and be heard by each other, and to note assurance from each that the location they are participating from is secure to ensure confidential deliberations remain confidential. Councillor Buckley, can you see and hear us?
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Can you confirm that the location you are participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
I can confirm.
Thank you. Councillor White, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can.
Can you confirm that the location you are participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. If a councillor participating electronically experiences technical difficulties during the meeting, we may adjourn briefly to enable the councillor to rejoin the meeting. Should the councillor be unable to reconnect within 5 minutes, the meeting shall resume in the councillor's absence. Apologies. Tonight we have 3. We have Councillor Reeves, Councillor Gratian and Councillor Van Diggle. Everyone else is present.
That's correct.
Declarations of interest. Have anyone got any declaration of interest to make? I would bring forward that despite being an apology for tonight's meeting, Councillor Van Diggle has declared a conflict of interest in relation to item 5.1.1. So I'd ask that that be noted. So we'll then move on to the confirmation of the minutes. So moved. Councillor Stowe and Councillor Crook.
Any discussion?
Yes, any business discussion, Adam? No. No? Councillor Crook? No, good. So the next meeting...
Well, we just need to move.
Oh, move it. We have to, sorry. Yep. I've got my trainer wheels on. So we have Councillor Stowe and Councillor Crook have moved that motion. So all those in favour of that, please. So that's Councillor White, are you voted there or not, or against? Oh, we've got a problem.
I think Councillor White's screen is frozen. There's a technical difficulty, Chair.
Yeah, so where do we go? Do we have to wait now?
We do need to, yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I think he's back.
We can hear you, John, but...
Yeah, I voted. I voted
you're in favour?
for the minutes to be...
Good, thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair, I think it might be useful to have that again, just so that there's clarity and
all right.
of the hands that are shown.
All right, so we can put that vote again, please. All those in favour? We've got everyone except John. I think we've counted those ones. You can. So we have to resolve this issue.
I think we do.
Yeah.
Chair. Yes.
Apologies for this.
I know this is very early in the meeting, but as per the rules, could I suggest we just take just a 2-minute adjournment,
yep.
5-minute adjournment. We'll get this resolved, hopefully, and then we can get back on our
yep.
way.
Yep.
If I had some more chocolates, I'd hand them out. But...
The budget's broke.
Taking a...
Yeah, we could just get this sorted out, yeah. Yep. Good.
Hello.
You there again, John?
Time to drive in.
I think so, but I've got nothing on my screen.
We got you, but we've got to be able to see you and hear you, is the problem.
You
If I
can't see
may,
me?
Chair, yeah. If I may, Chair, John, I've sent you a message what to do. You'll need to turn your computer off and rejoin, and then reboot it and rejoin the meeting.
Can you hear me?
We can hear
No
you,
one
but you're
can
still
hear me.
frozen in body.
Okay. Well, that's a new trend these days.
Yeah, the cryovac.
Oh, I've got Anthony ringing me. I've got the IT people inside the computer at the minute, so if I shut it down, they're gone.
Oh, okay. You're back on deck now.
Yeah, you're moving now.
Okay.
Now we're missing the CEO.
Oh, no.
John's barely live.
My phone's failing as well. Tell Anthony to get back in.
John, can you hear me?
Yes.
John, Tom
Yes.
wants to know if we're live. I said, most of us are. I'm not sure about you, though.
Where we were. So the next meeting will be on the 5th of September, 2023, at these premises. Requests for leave. Do we have any requests?
Possibly. There are no requests for leave, Chair. However, without wanting to seem to be a stickler.
What have I done?
No. It's nothing you've done. It's just that we have tried to do the vote for the minutes previously, but we haven't actually seen everyone's
Oh,
vote.
so we've got to do it
So
again.
it would be appropriate to actually do that so that we can see all the
All
votes. Appreciate this is the third time lucky, but we
Yeah.
need to.
All right, we'll give it another go. So all those in favour of the minutes? Excellent. Excellent. So petitions, I believe we have none.
None have been received.
Yeah,
Chair.
all right. We now move to item 1.7.2, questions of council. Tonight we have 20 questions from members of the community. So to ensure that all questions are able to be presented to council, I'm exercising the chair's discretion to extend the time for open forum by a further 30 minutes. You don't have to use it all. Further, as 19 of those items relate to 5.1.1, which is the Fullarton Drive planning application, I believe that Councillor Crook would like to move a procedural motion to have those questions heard at that item. Councillor Crook.
Yes, thank you, Chair. To assist with the flow of the meeting, I'd like to move that the questions relating to the Fullarton Drive application be heard at item 5.1.1 of tonight's agenda.
Thank you. Do I have it? Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Is the motion opposed? No? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour?
Pardon me, Deputy Mayor, just a point of order on process. I didn't hear that there was a seconder.
Yes,
I put my hand up.
Councillor Stowe.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it wasn't, you didn't verbalise that?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
Yeah.
I might be having audio issues. Sorry.
Right.
Okay.
So I'll now put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. As all questions relating to Fullarton Drive planning application will now be heard at item 5.1.1, I now call on Wendy Reynolds, if she's present, to ask her question of council. And I just go back to my speaking notes, that members of the public addressing council are reminded to extend due courtesy and respect to the council, its staff and its processes under which it operates, and shall take direction from the chair whenever called upon to do so. There will be no discussion or debate with public questions or submissions. However, councillors may ask questions of clarification of the speaker. I, as chair, reserve the right to cease a question or submit at any point, or submission at any point, if it is deemed appropriate or inconsistent with council's governance rules or mutual respect charter. So I'd now ask Wendy if she could come forward and present her question. Straight to that chair there, please.
Good evening, councillors.
Just press the little red button.
Yep,
Yeah,
done.
that's it.
Good evening. This is in just regards to the Toonalook Waters estate. What my question is, does the council concede that the Kumbungi present was not planted and occurred due to the stagnant water as a direct result of the 2-year period of time that the pump wasn't working? And despite that, I would like to know why the council thinks that the residents need to pay for the removal and the clean-up of the Kumbungi when it was the council's, let me find the right word, I do apologise.
You're right.
Why the council took so long to replace it and install a new one that is way too small for what the actual job that it needs to do.
Ms Weigel.
Thank you, Chair. In the consultants' reports that are referred to in the council report that council is considering tonight, there was a referral to the consultants advising that there was no original vegetation plan identified on council's files, so the original vegetation design intent is unclear. Therefore, without clarity about the original landscaping, council is not in a position to confirm or deny the supposition that's been put to us this evening. Even if the typha was not originally planted, there are a number of ways that it could have been brought into the system. The statement that the pump was inoperable for a 2-year period is also felt to be inaccurate. While there were reports of the pump not working from time to time, these reports were acted on until a final inspection in March 2021 identified that the pump was no longer able to be repaired, and the pump and the solar system were replaced in June of that year. I'm advised that stagnant water was not the cause of the presence of typha in the system. This is a wetland that is classified as a slow-flowing system, which is a suitable environment for typha to grow. I would also add that the new pump is a higher capacity than the pump it replaced, and the lake was designed to have fluctuating water levels, which could play an important role for the ecological health of the system. Therefore, a solar pump was installed to keep the lake at a satisfactory minimum water level and maintain sufficient fluctuations for ecological purposes. The council report to be considered tonight states that it's reasonable to expect residents to contribute to the revegetation, but does not suggest that the community pays for the entire project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Weigel, and thank you, Wendy.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Public submissions, I believe we have none.
Correct.
And items to be tabled, I believe there is none.
None tonight, Chair.
Which gets us to notice of motion. And Councillor Buckley, I believe that you have a notice of motion.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I have a notice of motion to develop and implement a data dashboard. So that a report be presented to a future meeting of council on the feasibility of developing and implementing publicly available data dashboards to ensure transparency, accountability and community engagement. Chair, do you wish me to speak to the motion or?
Might need a seconder.
Yes, yeah. Is there a seconder for the motion?
I'm
Councillor
happy
Crook?
to second that.
Thank you very much. So, councillors, this is a really important part of our process. And today we consider an important proposal that has the potential to shape the future of our community and how our council actively engages with people in a real way. This motion seeks to embrace the power of data and technology in enhancing transparency and accountability and community engagement within our local governance. In our rapidly evolving world, the importance of transparent and accountable governance cannot be overstated. And as representatives of this community, we owe it to our ratepayers to ensure that their voices are heard and their concerns addressed and their trust in our decisions are upheld. It is with this commitment in mind that I present to you my motion, which calls for a report to be presented to a future meeting of this council. And this report will delve into the feasibility of developing and implementing a publicly available data dashboard system, a move that holds the potential to transform the way we interact with our community and the way that the community interacts with us. The rationale behind this proposal is clear and it's compelling. By harnessing the power of data dashboards, we can achieve several vital objectives. First and foremost, we can significantly enhance transparency and accountability. Data dashboards have the unique capability of transforming complex information into easily understandable visuals, making it accessible to all members of our community. And imagine a world where anyone can access and review council activities at the click of a button, fostering a sense of trust and transparency, which I'm sure we can all agree is the cornerstone of effective governance. Furthermore, these dashboards have the potential to revolutionise community engagement. By presenting data in a visual and engaging manner, we can encourage greater participation from our community members and inform citizens that will empower community. And by sharing data in a comprehensible format, we invite our residents to actively participate in the decision-making process that shapes the future of our locality together. So the integration of this dashboard underscores our commitment to evidence-based planning. And we live in an era where decisions guided by data-driven insights are paramount. By showcasing that our choices are rooted in data analysis, we not only enhance the credibility of our decisions, but also inspire greater confidence in the ratepayers who we represent. In uncertain times, this relationship becomes critical. And lastly, the implementation of the Dash Data Board can lead to operational efficiencies, streamlining the processes, which means that we can focus resources on making impactful decisions rather than being bogged down in administrative tasks. So I ask councillors that you join me this evening in supporting this motion and that just to understand that when I stood for local government, this very issue was a plank in my platform. And tonight I can make good on my pledge to the community for a more transparent and accountable council. So thank you, councillors, and I'll throw it to the floor.
Councillor Crook, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. And look, I agree with Councillor Bunkley's statements that transparency and accountability are indeed the very cornerstones of good governance. These new technical upgrades to our IT system that we're currently undertaking will allow these systems to be built. It's modelled on the work of Frankston Council, I think maybe among others, but I'm certainly aware Frankston Council are doing this work via their Transparency Hub. And it will really allow the decision-making process to be more easily accessible and, where required, subject to public scrutiny. The technology exists, it's being put in place in other places, and it really is a good idea. So I'm happy to commend Councillor Buckley on the motion and recommend that we all support it.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Is the motion opposed? Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Where would we get to? Deferred business. I believe there is none. And councillor and delegates report. Might start on my left with Councillor Uri, please.
Thank you, Chair. As usual, I have a written report which I'm happy to submit for inclusion in the minutes, but I would just like to highlight two things in the community that I've particularly enjoyed attending since our last council meeting. The first one was National Tree Planting Week. Actually, I thought it was a day, but since I attended two different events on different days, I think it actually is a week. So it was marked with a terrific gathering organised by Bairnsdale Urban Landcare Group, leading a group of scouts, guides and their families in a tree planting morning on the north side of the Mitchell River. The work of these groups over a period of time is resulting in some fabulous effects, growth of the native vegetation along the riverbank, and it's enjoyed by many users of the walking track. So I'd like to congratulate and thank that particular land care group for their practical work, and especially in sharing their knowledge and skills with our younger community members. It's part of a terrific and ongoing story. Also marking the same cause, National Tree Planting, our youth ambassadors arranged a tree planting at the Bairnsdale Secondary College, assisted by the specialist school and council staff on Monday the 31st of August. Councillor Vandergel and I were able to join them and plant a few trees ourselves. Again, congratulations to all those who contributed to this really worthy event. And on Wednesday the 9th of August, the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor oh no, that's a different one. I was going to speak about the Girls on Fire, but I'm hoping you might speak about that. I joined the Mayor and our youth ambassadors for their regular meeting on Wednesday the 9th of August. The work of this group is largely focused on providing events and training opportunities by and for young folk across Gippsland. I was really impressed at how aware they are of needing to extend the reach of their offerings beyond Bairnsdale and Lakes Entrance, and the energy and capacity of the leaders is really quite extraordinary. So I enjoyed that one too. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Gone blank. Councillor Buckley, we'll move across to you.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I attended a stakeholders meeting for the Omeo region, the BTA, which was very informative. There was a lot that was discussed at that meeting, and I know it's a big night, so I won't go into it, and I will present it in my written report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White?
I'm good, thank you. I'll pass.
Thank you. Councillor Crook?
A couple of quick things. It's been a busy couple of weeks, but I went and visited the Bairnsdale Tennis Club late last week. Was it early? Yep.
Friday.
From Friday. Thank you, Trevor. They've got a range of, shall we say, challenges there, a bunch of ageing infrastructure. But look, it was really good to meet with some of their executive and have some of our asset management team come along and listen to what their concerns were, really with a view to trying to work more collaboratively with that organisation into the future, albeit that it's not, strictly speaking, a council asset or council managed land. We recognise the significant contribution that club makes to local community through health outcomes and the like. So that was certainly worth doing, and we're looking forward to how we can continue to work with them in the future. Yesterday I attended the Australian Coastal Councils Association meeting. A number of things probably to report from that, including the association's endeavours to try and better understand short stay accommodation and its impacts on coastal communities and local economies around the coastal areas of their member councils, looking to engage Sydney University to conduct some research to better understand those impacts and potential benefits. Another important element of the Coastal Councils Association is the ongoing lobbying work on the federal government to try and implement a national and standardised approach to natural hazard risk. As we're all aware, the coastal zone is, by its very nature, alive and a rapidly changing space. Of course, in a rapidly changing world with global warming, that is all the more exciting, and so we really feel there needs to be a national approach to mapping out hazard risk around the coastal zones, and also providing local communities through local and state governments some kind of support to implement local solutions. So some interesting stuff happening in that space. There's a few other things there, but I might leave it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Stowe.
Look, it's been a busy week, as Tom said, mainly the usual roads, rates and rubbish, but attended the art gallery during last week, and they had a photographic competition between the 6 clubs of Gippsland, and these clubs extend virtually from Pakenham to the border, and some really nice stuff was done there, and it's great to see this sort of event happening in Bairnsdale.
Thank you. I've submitted my written report, but I'll just touch on a couple of things. August the 9th, the Mayor and I attended the Lakes Secondary College Elders Day, which was a really, really well organised event, and I thank Craig Sutherland and his staff for extending that invitation to us. And then after we finished there, we met Councillor Urey at Forest Tech for the Girls on Fire completion of course awards, which was a day that, or an afternoon that I totally enjoyed. And to see how those girls, I think they were year 9 or 10, had come to grips with the tasks that were put before them in the scenarios that we witnessed as a part of their, for want of a better word, graduation. It was really heartening to see that they know how to put out a fire. They really did well. And on the 11th at Moe, I attended the Gippsland Business Awards finalist breakfast, and I just want to pass on my best wishes to the nominations or nominees from East Gippsland, and wish them every success when the winners are announced on the 25th of August, I think it is, at Churchill. Thank you. So, which brings us to item 1.7.2, which is questions of council. I'll just go back to this here, where members of the public addressing council are reminded to extend due courtesy and respect to the council, its staff, and the processes under which it operates, and shall take direction from the chair whenever called upon to do so. There will be no discussion or debate with public questions or submissions. However, councillors may ask questions of clarification of the speaker. I, as chair, reserve the right to cease a question or submission at any point if it is deemed inappropriate or inconsistent with council's governance rules or mutual respect charter. So I've got a list of names here, and I'll just work down them if that's okay. And I would invite Jane Wilkie to come forward first. And I'd just also like to ask that, given that we've got 20 questions, if you could keep your preambles concise.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Hello, councillors. Today I wanted to ask what provisions have been made in regards to vegetation in the proposed subdivision to ensure affected residents do not have further encroachments of their views.
So that will be Mr McConnell, I think.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. That matter has been considered, and there's a proposed condition 3C in the recommendations that restricts the height of vegetation on lots and relates to heights within the building envelope, and then outside of the building envelope there's a limit on the height, which I believe is 2 metres.
So it's 2 metres in the corridors as well?
So outside of the building envelopes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And my second question was, how can the council make a decision on accepting the subdivision without having received the findings from the Commonwealth regarding the Latham snipe, which is my understanding you haven't got that as yet?
We can refer to Mr McConnell.
Yep. So thank you, and through you, Chair. The EPBC Act referral applies in a different jurisdiction. So it's Commonwealth jurisdiction as opposed to the state jurisdiction. Council's required to make decisions under the Planning Environment Act. It's possible that the outcome of the EPBC referral may require some amendments to the application, and they'll be dealt with on their merits at the time that that information is available. I do note that there's nothing in the Planning Environment Act that requires council to wait for a decision from the EPP under the EPBC Act, and you would expect that, given the nature of the issues and the way the two acts work together, if that was the intention of the authors of the Act, they would have put specific requirements in there for that, to that effect, and they haven't. So there's nothing to stop one proceeding without the other. And in other matters, there is provisions that say you need to pause the planning matter until other matters are resolved, for example, around some cultural heritage matters.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Number 2 on my list is Dr. Derek Russell. Is you here, Derek?
Thank you, Councillor, for the chance to speak. It's a question on behalf of myself and BirdLife East Gippsland. Following the construction of the proposed 3.6 hectare reserve by the developer, is Council prepared to accept the reserve from the developer, as the developer proposes, and maintain it in a form suitable for continuous use by migratory wading birds and especially Latham snipe, noting that the area will then continue to be usable only for passive recreation from the footpath?
Again, Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So Council accepts that the reserve will come under its management once it's been constructed. The detailed management arrangements for the reserve will be informed by the EPBC Act referral outcome and also the detailed drainage and water quality management plans, which are required as proposed conditions of the approval that require further consent from both Council and from the East Gippsland Catchment Management Authority. And I do note that the reserve will provide or fill a range of purposes, but certainly one of the matters that will need to be considered is the outcomes of the EPBC Act in relation to habitat for the Latham snipe.
Thank you, that's good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Number 3 is Peter Albrecht. Is Peter here?
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions. My first question to the councillors is about the change of the setbacks for residence number 2042 from 18 metres to 10 metres. The setback was approved by the Shire Planning Officer during the last application. I maintain the reason for an 18-metre setback is still valid. Will the 18-metre setback be reinstated?
Again, Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. No, that is not proposed in the conditions of the approval. I do note that there was no previous approval of any of the aspects of the last application. So the VCAT determination in 2014 refused the application, and this is a new application and needs to be considered on its merits, and any of the discussions there at the time were on a without prejudice basis. So the commentary and the findings that are set out in the report from the VCAT member informs our decision making in relation to this application, but there is no approval or requirement or agreement that binds Council in its decision making in this item.
Well, I'm due to say that I don't agree with that.
I'm sorry, Peter, I have to pull you up there. This is not a
that's
debate.
Fine. Okay, my second question is in regard to section 173, prohibiting further subdivisions. The applicant confirmed they are agreeable to that, but the planning department struck it out, supposing that the usual permit to subdivide process will prevail. Again, I do not agree with this. Surely, given the sensitive nature of this land, a less dense occupation is more important. Will the Shire follow the lead of the applicant to allow the section 173 proposed by them?
Again, Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. The officer's recommendation is that any future application for subdivision is determined through under the relevant planning scheme requirements. If the subdivision is proposed, it will be subject to public notice and assessment as required under the Act and the planning scheme requirements. And in particular, it's limited by the proposed building envelopes, and so that is the matter which will determine the density of development.
Yes, may I just end by saying that my wife's questions were disallowed, which I consider most
No, I think you confine yourself to the two
I
questions.
just thought the councillors should know that.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Yes, Peter, back. Thank you.
Sorry.
It's all right. Councillor Crook has a question.
No, just a question of clarification. You mentioned that the developer is actually amenable to a 173 agreement which would prevent further subdivision. Is that your understanding also, Mr McConnell?
Through you, Chair, yes, that's our understanding.
Okay, I guess this is not the forum for me to ask why, just to confirm that that is the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair.
Good. Mr David Nicastro. You come forward, please, David.
The CMA and the proponent both acknowledge that the 1% AEP flood level for the site under future climatic conditions is 2.8 metres AHD. Though the majority of lot areas will be above 4 metres, much of the eastern stormwater treatment infrastructure will be between 2 and 2.8 metres, thereby subject to considerable flood, sea level rise and coastal inundation risks. So given the use of stormwater infrastructure is integral for the purposes of and planning for residential development, and that these assets are vulnerable to saline intrusion, why has the Shire overlooked the objectives and strategies of Clause 13.01-1S, Natural Hazards and Climate Change, and Clause 13.01-2S, Coastal Inundation and Erosion, and Clause 13.031S, Floodplain Management, in recommending approval for this development?
Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. The objectives and strategies of Clause 13.01-1S and Clause 13.012S have in fact been taken into account and have informed our assessment. I also note that there is a proposed condition that requires both Council and CMA approval of the final design or stormwater management plan for the site.
Second question.
Yep. With the eastern constructed dam wall height at 2.8 metres AHD being the same as the 1% AEP flood level for the site under future climatic conditions, no safety margin of error appears to have been applied by the proponent in the proposed stormwater management strategy that's been conditionally approved by the CMA. Moreover, the CMA's conditional approval acknowledged it holds no information in relation to the arrangement and capacity of stormwater drainage infrastructure in the area, and that it did not consider flood risk for these essential municipal assets. Add to this the CMA's very significant disclaimers: no warranty is made as to the accuracy and liability of their estimates. There's always a possibility that a flood larger in height than the extent that the 1% probability flood may occur in the future, and that this information is subject to change as new information becomes available as further studies are carried out. So given all this, the CMA's call for caution is in its conditional approval and the zero margin for error in the proponent's stormwater planning. Why has the Shire not taken a precautionary approach and insisted the stormwater assets be relocated to higher ground?
Again, Mr McConnell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through you. So firstly, I do note that the CMA has not objected to the proposal. A detailed drainage management plan is required as one of the recommended conditions of approval, and that plan will need to take into account the levels and the design to minimise the potential impacts of any flooding. I just draw your attention to some of the commentary that was included in the 2014 VCAT decision, and it just references there that...
could you be quiet back there, please? It's distracting.
So I just do note that it does say, in regarding to the impacts of a flood event on the constructed wetland and that of the adjoining Ramsar wetland, we consider the extent of impact to be negligible, and that is because during the flood event, the size and impact across the scope of the flood generally would be of such significance that any impacts from scouring of water and sediment from the constructed wetland would be minor due to dilution and mixing with the flood waters. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the previous VCAT reports are informative, but they're not determining in terms of Council's decision making tonight.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Councillor Crook has a question.
A question of clarification. So, sorry, Mr. McConnell, are we accepting that this area is likely to be inundated, and what you're saying is that under those conditions, the CMA's advice is that that's okay?
So Councillor Crook, there is parts of the reserve area which are below the 2.8 metre AHD, which is the height identified by the CMA as the 1% exceedance, together with the 0.8 metres sea level rise.
I think the comments or the question was in relation to the stormwater management infrastructure specifically. Were you not referring to that?
So that's, as I was saying, I'm letting you know that the area in which that reserve, which includes the stormwater infrastructure, parts of that are below the 2.8 metre AHD level.
So they are expected to flood, that's okay?
So again, I'm not... So there is areas of that which are below the 1% level, and with the addition of the 0.8 metre sea level rise. So at the point in time that 0.8 metres of sea level has occurred, sea level rise has occurred, there is a 1% chance of that flood exceedance.
Sorry, I'm still not entirely clear, but I think we just need to move on.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Buckley, hang on, David, don't disappear, please. Sorry, Sonia, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that was a very difficult question, Stuart, and just so that I'm clear, what's being said here is that there's a possibility of flooding in a certain part of the reserve, but it won't impact the houses that are to be built. Is that correct?
Councillors, and through you, Mayor, I'm being very careful about saying whether something ever will or will not flood, because flooding by its nature is a matter of chance, and we're relying on predictions and percentage chances of things occurring. So for that reason, I'm being very careful about the way in which I'm framing that. I do note that the houses are all, and we can confirm this in a moment, but the housing lots are all at a higher level again from 2.8. I believe it's about 4 metres. So again, there's additional safety margin for the areas that are to be developed for housing.
And have we known in the past that area has flooded above that 4 metre? What's the historical documentation in regards to that flooding, if you wouldn't mind me asking?
So that's a question I might take on notice for the moment, Councillor, and when we get to the appropriate part of the agenda, we might respond to Councillors' questions.
Certainly.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Good on you. Move on to Susan Morton, if she's available, please. Good on you, Susan.
Good evening to you all. My first question is about the East Gippsland Shire Council's charter, in which it says that you value community consultation. But as an objector to the original plan, I feel that the revised plan hasn't been presented to us. We had little idea that it was going to be so quickly put to the council, and haven't even seen the plan, and feel that we've been let down by giving us very little time to even have a look at a plan to see what changes have been made, if any.
So is there a question there, please?
Yes. Why has the revised plan not been presented to those people who made objections originally? And why were we not consulted and asked to come and have a look at a plan?
Thanks. Mr McConnell again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through you. So there has been no revised plan of subdivision lodged. There has been further information provided regarding the proposed building envelopes and the drainage arrangements, but this does not constitute an amendment to the application. I also note in relation to this that in relation to planning matters, there's quite a defined process for advertising or giving notice in relation to an application, considering objections, providing an opportunity in relation to that, in our case through the planning consultation meeting, considering those and then making a recommendation to council, which is the process that we've followed. And then following that, if parties are not satisfied in respect of that, there's the opportunities through VCAT for review. So in respect of planning matters, there's quite a defined process that is intended to be appropriate and be fair to all parties who are involved in the planning application process.
And my second question is, it was my understanding that in the EPBC Act, it states that council should be aware that there are consequences of not referring to the EPBC. That is, it is a serious offence to take action before the Minister has made a decision on the referral or assessment process and undertake an action while we're assessing it. That was my understanding of the... So that council can't make a decision until they've heard from the EPBC.
Mr McConnell.
Yes, so thank you, and through you, Chair. The EPBC Act and its obligations refer to the proponent, not to council.
This is what it states.
So the EPBC Act refers to the proponent, so the proponent is not able to has the obligation to refer the matter to the Commonwealth for consideration, and the proponent also has an obligation in relation to then not taking action while that matter is being considered, and that action being matters which would have an effect on the matters of a national environmental significance as defined in the Act.
Councillor Crook has a question.
Another point of ask for clarification. So we accept that the EBPC process prevents the proponent from taking further action, but to propose a large subdivision with a huge drainage management system and stuff doesn't constitute further action. It's only on ground, is it? So the planning process isn't included in that, what's determined to be further action?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, that's my understanding, and so the obligations there are on the party that is taking the action, being in this case the proponent or the developer. I'd also note that there is a proposed condition to be very clear that the works cannot commence until the EPBC Act matter is resolved.
So the planning of the Act doesn't constitute the Act. This approvals process tonight isn't seen as an action.
That is my understanding.
Yeah, okay, understood. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Susan. Move on to Mr. Nick Fisher, if he's available. Is Nick here? Doesn't look like it. Right, good. So if we haven't got Nick here, I'd move on to Mr David Morton. And I'd just like to remind people that they ask the question that has been submitted, please. So David, are you here, please? Not here either? Good. Mr Garrett Hall, is he here? No? All right.
Yes,
Did he?
yes, and David too.
I'm certainly happy to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, if you're happy
Chair,
to do
but,
that, we'll allow that.
That wasn't in my notes, which is why, for the gallery's point. So for the gallery's point, that's why I hadn't done that.
Yeah, well, if you're happy to do it, I'll allow it.
So this is Mr Garrett Hall.
And Mr David, Mr David Norton and Garrett too, is that right? Yes.
Well, I might just ask for some clarification about Mr Morton, but I'm happy to read Mr Garrett Hall. So the preamble states, the insurance industry has warned the cost of ongoing intensifying natural hazard events are expected to keep pushing up insurance premiums for all property owners due to the shared cost basis of calculating insurance premiums. With recent cost estimates by the Victorian Marine and Coastal Council warning that if no adaptation action was taken, the impacts of sea level rise and associated storm surge by 2100 could be as high as 441 billion for Victoria alone. Question is, given that building more homes in areas of high natural hazard risk is almost guaranteed to contribute to higher insurance costs for everyone and leave those at most risk unable to afford cover, why doesn't the Shire listen to the experts, especially insurance companies, who make it their business to calculate risk and stop approving developments in high-risk locations?
So I'd ask Mr McConnell to respond to that, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So, firstly, questions about insurance are best directed to the insurance industry, not to council. Secondly, when we're making a planning decision, we're required to consider the relevant matters for planning considerations, which are set out in the Planning Environment Act and in the planning scheme. So they're the matters that council is required to consider. I do note that in relation to this, the houses are proposed to be constructed on lots that are higher than the 2.8 metres AHD level set by current policy and by the advice of the Gippsland CMA, which is the appointed referral agency for these matters. They are the experts providing advice in relation to this matter, and as previously advised, the lots that will be developed for housing are actually significantly higher again than the 2.8 metres. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell.
Chair, I've sought some clarification and I'm happy to read Mr Morton's questions, of which there are two, if you're happy for me to proceed.
Yes, thank you.
Question one is, are the Planning Department aware of the RCS, in brackets, Regional Coastal Strategy? If so, has it been referenced to inform their decision to approve the subdivision?
So yes, thank you, CEO, and through you, Chair. Yeah, we believe Mr Morton is referring to the Regional Catchment Strategy, which again is a broad strategic document relating to catchment management and is not inconsistent with the proposed or the recommendation to Council this evening.
Question two reads, coastal acid sulphate soils, in brackets, capital CASS, occur naturally along many parts of Victoria's coastal zone and if left undisturbed are largely benign. However, if disturbed, i.e. water drains from the soil and air enters, they can react with oxygen and produce sulphuric acid. This can be detrimental to the environment with impacts that include acidification of water and soil, deoxygenation of water, poor water quality, dissolution of soil, rock and concrete, and corrosion of metals. Sometimes impacts can be extreme. Who and how is, can be extreme, e.g. resulting in fish kills. Who and how is this going to be managed?
So
Thank you, Mr McConnell.
Thank you, CEO, and through you, Mayor, Chair. The developer has the responsibility to ensure that if coastal acid sulphate soils are found during construction, any issues and impacts are appropriately managed. And there is guidance that sets out the requirements in relation to that, and that being the Victorian Best Practice Guidelines for assessing and managing coastal acid sulphate soils.
Councillor Crook.
Further question of clarification. You said the onus is on the proponent to identify the presence of acid sulphate soils. Have any core samples or test holes or anything been undertaken, or are we to expect that they'll be revealed if they're there once they start digging the work for the dams, if that's what happens? I just ask because I'm aware that there are acid sulphate soils at Cape Fullarton, and it's come at significant taxpayer cost to remediate previous developments that failed to take them into consideration.
So, Chair, is it appropriate to be responding to councillor questions at this point, or
if you want to
or
hold
do we should
maybe hold it over until the item is debated.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that, but it was a point of clarification in relation to the question that was asked, that has any testing been undertaken?
Oh, well, you're right. You're happy to answer that now, Stuart?
I might ask for assistance from our planning officers. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Through you, Chair. Not to my knowledge, there hasn't been specific testing undertaken for coastal acid sulphate soils on that site. But as Stuart pointed out, there is an obligation for due diligence by the developer once works commence, that if they are detected, then the best practice guidelines come into play.
Good, thank you. All right, we'll move on to Ms Lynette Wilkinson, if she is present. Thanks, Lynette.
Good evening, Chair and councillors. The previous building envelope plan, drawn on the 9th of the 8th, 2022, showed each lot with a maximum building height expressed as an AHD. The current amended plan, drawn the 30th of the 5th, 2023, shows several lots without a maximum building height. Can Council please explain the rationale for this change, referencing specifically Lot 59, which will be 10 Fullarton Drive? This lot is surrounded by houses in Fullarton Drive with height-restricted covenants, and if not changed, will severely disadvantage existing residents. Thank you.
Mr McConnell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through you. Each of the lots in the subdivision will in fact include building envelopes that impose the relevant front, rear and side setbacks and also maximum building heights. We've obtained clarification from the applicant that all lots will include the necessary setbacks and maximum height controls, but it is noted, as has been pointed out by Ms Wilkinson, that there are some lots where that's not shown currently in the plans. So that's lots 10, 11, 12, 15, 17, 18, 25, 28, 29, 30, 33, 53, 57 and 59. And these are captured and addressed through a proposed condition 2A and 2B in the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So then we'll move on to Ross McGregor, if he's here, please.
Evening, Chair and councillors. I think the question that was just raised previous is probably answered, and mine was related to Lot 59 and the height limitation as far as having a covenant on it. If I can just background you, I moved it into my location 28 years ago, and as all previous applications have had that designated block as being a designated roadway. And on that basis I bought. So now I'm going to have a house sitting with no, as I understand it, the current limitation, there's no covenant on it, and therefore they could have whatever height they wish.
So is that in the form of a question, or you?
Sorry, no, mine was just, the question is, does council intend to have the same covenants, specifically height limitations imposed on 10 Fullarton Drive, lot 59, which applies to surrounding and adjacent lots?
So thank you, and through you, Chair. As we just outlined with the previous response, there will be height limitations placed on all of the lots, including the one you identify, and that's addressed through conditions 2A and 2B. I do note one thing though. There were previous adjacent developments where that was dealt with by way of a covenant, which is something the developer places on the title, and it's not proposed to use a covenant. That's not the tool or the mechanism that council would ordinarily use, but it is still intended to have that requirement in terms of a height limitation.
Thank you. My second question, and it relates to traffic management within the precinct. And mine is, does council intend to impose any time parameters to address the matters of traffic management within that precinct as a matter of urgency? Just to background you, there's only one way in and one way out of that precinct at the current time.
Mr McConnell again.
Yeah, thank you. So there are a number of places through the municipality where there is residential development with one access in and out. The traffic assessment indicates that there are no significant traffic impacts arising from the proposed subdivision, so that was presented as part of the application documents. Council doesn't have specific control over the timing of the future extension of Fullarton Drive, but notes the extension is included as part of the strategic planning for the area, so particularly the Paynesville Growth Area Structure Plan.
Good. Thank you very much, Ross. And last on the list, but not least, is Cheryl Romano. Is she here? Yep. All right. Yep, I thought you were rushing up to ask a question. Good on you, Kate. Thanks, Cheryl.
Good evening, Chair and councillors. My first question relates to reasonable sharing of views. A reasonable sharing of views is a valid expectation under the law. It was central to a VCAT hearing as recently as July this year. While the view sharing in Fullarton Drive has been extensively examined, there's been little such discussion regarding houses in Eagle Bay Terrace. As the proposed setback for houses below Eagle Bay Terrace is only 5 metres and the density is double the lots on Eagle Bay Terrace, I don't see how this can be achieved. My question is, how will council protect the interests of residents and ensure that they will continue to have reasonable shared views of the lake and Point Fullarton?
Thank you, Cheryl. Mr McConnell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And through you, the proposed conditions of approval do provide for requirements for rear boundary setbacks and building envelopes, and in officers' view that is providing for reasonable view sharing.
My second question. In the documentation, DELP has stated that it does not object to the granting of a planning permit subject to the following conditions. All works must not increase erosion, sediment, impacts to flora and fauna, or the health and viability of the Point Fullarton Gippsland Lakes Reserve and the Lake King Wetlands Ramsar site to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. In an inquiry into the protections within the Victorian planning framework in August of last year, it was stated that there is a lack of effective post-approval monitoring of developer compliance with planning permit conditions, and that relying on private building inspectors to enforce approved building and development requirements has been a massive failure in ensuring appropriate oversight. Apart from assuring compliance with building regulations, how, in practical terms, will Council monitor and enforce the environmental stipulations of DELP?
Again, Mr McConnell.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So the proposed conditions of approval require a construction management plan, which will set out the provisions around a number of those matters you set out, you raise in terms of erosion and sediment, etc. And Council has technical staff that do monitor and inspect subdivision works and can take action where there is non-compliance.
Thank you, Cheryl. I believe we're now going to circle back to Mr Nick Fisher's question, and the CEO will present it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's two questions. I'll only be reading the first question because the second question is about insurance, which has been previously answered. So I'll just read the first question. Preamble. The revised lot layout and stormwater management assets still directly impact Latham snipe habitat of national significance and Ramsar wetlands of international significance. This is of particular relevance to Clause 12.01-1S, protection of biodiversity. Avoid impacts of land use and development on important areas of biodiversity, including wetlands and wetland wildlife habitat designated under the Ramsar Convention and sites utilised by species listed under various international treaties. My apologies, that was a very long sentence. Question is, given the very significant and extensive biodiversity values at stake, why hasn't the Shire given the objective and strategies of Clause 12.01-1S due consideration, irrespective of the EPBC assessment outcome as required under the planning scheme? So I know it's a similar question, Chair, but it does reference a different clause in that Act.
Good. Thank you, CEO. Mr McConnell.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So Clause 12.01-1S has been considered by officers in their assessment. I note the proposed subdivision proposes improvements to stormwater management and quality that will in fact reduce the current impacts of stormwater discharge into the wetland areas. The EPBC Act, though, is the appropriate mechanism for the detailed assessment of impacts on the matters of national environmental significance, which includes treaty matters, so Ramsar protected wetlands and the like, as well as on threatened species. So the EPBC Act process is appropriate for consideration of those matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. And that concludes question time. So now I'd like to call on the General Manager, Place and Community to introduce item 5.1.1 on tonight's agenda. I think that's Mr McConnell again.
Yeah. So, thank you, Chair. Councillors, before you is a report that is seeking to or recommends the issue of a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the multi-lot subdivision and native vegetation removal at 10 Fullarton Drive, Paynesville. And in accordance with our planning delegations policy, the matter's been reported to yourselves for decision. The relevant points for Council to consider, in addition to the matters we've covered in the questions from community just now. The application has been made subject to notice, and at the time when we were just preparing for this meeting, 52 objections had been received, and the planning consultation meeting was held in November 2022, and the minutes of that meeting are available and were attached to this item. The applicant supplied additional supporting materials since that planning consultation meeting, including a native mammal management plan and revised horizontal and vertical building envelope plans, and also have confirmed the referral of this proposal has been made under the EPBC Act, particularly in relation to the Latham Snipe. The land has been subject to previous VCAT determinations, and the outcomes of those have been considered in how the application was made and also in how council officers have assessed the application. So again, importantly, the previous VCAT matters in relation to the applications in these areas have provided commentary that informs this application, but the previous decision of VCAT to refuse is not binding, and in fact did not include other directions or similar which are binding on the council's consideration of this different and separate application. Overall, the assessment of the proposal is that the proposal complies with the objectives of clause 56 of the residential subdivision in the planning scheme, and the proposed native vegetation removal is also considered appropriate given the considerations to avoid, minimise and offset, and that the relevant principles have been achieved. The substance of objections have been considered, and the point of difference to make between the current application and past proposals include a reduction in the number of lots, the focus on building envelopes, which provides for view sharing and corridors for views to be achieved, the avoidance of development within the flood-prone areas, the scheme and the standards improvements which require higher levels of treatment of stormwater, and the adoption of the Paynesville Growth Area Structure Plan, where there is now more certainty as to the connectivity of this precinct over time, which will redirect traffic flow. As indicated, the EPBC referral process has commenced and may influence the final outcome of the subdivision. The applicant has accepted the risk of the EPBC referral resulting in modifications to the proposal that can be assessed after a permit is granted via an amendment to the permit, and that would be a normal planning permit amendment process with the relevant steps in that. This matter being outstanding is insufficient reason to halt the planning permit process, as the referral is not a requirement under the Planning Environment Act, nor does the Commonwealth EPBC Act prevent determination on a planning matter before the referral is resolved. I note there has been discussion about the impacts of climate change and coastal inundation. The proposal takes into account the prescribed benchmarks for sea level rise. The provision of the reserve between the coast and the lots where development would occur also provides an area in which coastal inundation impacts are managed over time. The officer's recommendation includes proposed conditions which address a number of the issues that have been raised by objectors, such as the height of vegetation, final design of the stormwater treatment system, and just recognising again that the permit can't be acted on until the EPBC matter is resolved. So the officer's recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit subject to the conditions outlined in attachment 1 to the report, and the conditions as outlined in attachment 1 to the report. And with me this evening to assist with any questions or details, Martin Richardson, the manager of planning, and also Rob Pringle, who's the coordinator of statutory planning. So thank you, Chair and councillors. If you have any questions, we're happy to assist.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Any questions, councillors? Mindy, then John.
Thank you, Chair. Mr McConnell, somebody else. Pardon. Would you please comment on the walking track down in the low area of this part we're talking about? What might the future of that be, considering the likelihood of future sea level rise and storm surge and so on?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair, as I think most of us know who've been on the track, it's quite close to the edge of the lake, and that foreshore is subject to significant erosion. So and the walking track is within a Crown Reserve, so it's not within the property that we're dealing with here, it's within a separate Crown Reserve. So the philosophy behind, part of the philosophy behind the creation of larger areas of reserve to the south of the walking track is to allow for, in the occurrence of further erosion and inundation, etc., is to allow some space for the retreat of vegetation and potentially for the duplication of the walking track. At this stage, we haven't finalised a preferred corridor for a future walking track, and that in part is because we would like to see what the outcome of the EPBC Act referral is, because that may place limitations on the location of infrastructure within the reserve. However, it is our aim that once that process is completed and we are into a final design process for the drainage and other infrastructure on the reserve, that we would identify a corridor, preferably, where an alternative walking track could be constructed to cater for the eventual loss of that foreshore walking track in the future.
And that's based on current levels that we've been working on from the CMA, the flood levels and inundation expectations?
Thanks, Councillor. Through you, Chair. As I said, we haven't finalised a corridor, but the preference at this stage would be to see if we can find a corridor which is more or less directly adjacent to the proposed road, so just north of the proposed road, which sits at around 4 metres above AHD. So the aim would be, again, once we've got some clearer indication as to what constraints might be placed on the reserve by the EPBC referral, that we would look to work with the designers and the applicant to find a location for a walking track if we can. And the most likely place for that would be on the high ground, which is just adjacent to the proposed road.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Councillor White.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Now, this is also addressed to Martin, and just towards the end of his discussion there, he's possibly answered my question, but I will ask it anyway, and it was actually about comments I've heard about the actual height above sea level that the access road to those houses is, and whether that road may become problematic to access those ones closest to the water, those properties.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair, and having been given advanced warning of the question, thank you very much, I've checked. So the alignment, the northern boundary of the road, that is the boundary adjacent to the reserve, is almost exactly aligned with the 4 metre AHD contour. So clearly that's 1.2 metres above the 2.8 limit, and therefore the road itself is 4 metres or more higher than the AHD level.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Any further questions? Councillor Crook.
Yeah, I've got a couple. One relates to wetland migration, which is the process whereby wetlands move further inland with sea level rise. So we've been told tonight that the drainage infrastructure for this project will be centred, will be around the 2 metre AHD contour. That's the bottom of the dam wall. We've also been told that that drainage infrastructure is likely to be inundated in the future, albeit temporarily or more. How, if that's the case, are we providing those migratory pathways for wetlands if the area that they would migrate into is going to be sandwiched between what will be permanently inundated lake and a dam wall?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair. So again, I will point out that the final drainage design for the wetlands, detention basins, etc., will be determined as a condition of approval. That's the normal process. We have an overall concept design provided at the application stage, and then a condition applies that says we need detailed design to our satisfaction. There have been certainly questions or concerns that have been raised by members of the public about that actual construction detail. So that will be something that we need to work through. I guess, Councillor, the principle is that the creation of the reserve provides a buffer. We can't predict when or in what manner that inundation or potential wetland migration is likely to occur. That would be almost impossible to predict at this point. But the creation of the reserve and the width of that buffer, if you like, is regarded by officers as a significant contribution to actually accommodating that potential. I would say that it's likely that in, let's say, 20 years or 40 years, there will be some changes to the coastal form there, and we consider that, given that the area of land is provided there for that reserve, that there is significant potential for other arrangements to be put in place that would accommodate the recedents of the coastline and vegetation and wetland migration. I couldn't say what form that will take because at this stage it's almost impossible to predict what the nature of the change would be. But again, I'd reiterate that the creation of the reserve in itself provides for a considerable opportunity to manage those issues into the future, much more than what would be the case if the development was on the 2.8 metre AHD line itself.
Okay, sorry, my understanding is that the development is on the 2 metre AHD line. Is that not the case?
So the subdivision itself, the road and the residential lots are above.
I'm referring to the drainage.
The reserve itself, yes. So it's from my recollection, Councillor, it's between about 2 and 2.8, depending on which part of the wetland we're talking about.
Bottom, the downhill side of the dam wall, I think, sits right on the 2 metre contour from memory.
Yep. So, as has been indicated, there is the potential in an extreme flood event, a 1 in 100 year flood event, for that infrastructure to be inundated, but that would be, of course, a temporary inundation. Again, I'd come back to my answer, which is that the creation of the reserve in itself provides an opportunity for future changes to the drainage arrangements if they're required. Again, cannot predict it, but in 40 or 60 years' time there might be some change that's required to the construction of those drainage elements and or to the implementation of other arrangements to deal with wetland migration. At this stage, we believe that the creation of the reserve in itself provides that opportunity, but I couldn't predict exactly what the construction methods or outcomes might be. That would be something that would need to be considered when the nature of the change is more evident.
Thank you. Can I ask a further question?
Yeah, allow you one more.
Thanks. Look, I absolutely agree. Predicting the future's fraught with difficulty, but we obviously have really good, strong evidence to suggest that sea level is going in one direction. It's not going down, it's going up. Just how fast and just how far, obviously matters of conjecture, and there's various data sets that are guiding those decisions, and I'm happy to accept that the data that's being used in this development decision represents the official level at this point in time. But I put it to you that even as early as last week, we've been presented with other data sets that put those levels significantly higher, significantly sooner. So if we're meeting the benchmark and it's on the 2 metre contour, how does that represent a precautionary approach to climate risk into the future if we can reasonably foresee that those levels are actually likely to rise above and beyond where they are currently predicted to?
Thanks, Councillor. Through you, Chair. All I can say is that we are taking the precautionary principle because we are taking into account the 1 in 100 year flood and sea level rise considerations in this. That's the standard that applies today, and I don't believe it would be at all appropriate for Council to be applying standards that are different to those that are adopted as a matter of state policy.
Is a precautionary approach not appropriate in your view?
I believe the precautionary approach has been adopted in this case.
So,
Thank you.
Mr McConnell, do you have something to
yeah, I might just add to that. So it's quite appropriate for councillors to rely on the advice of the CMA in relation to this matter. As Mr Richardson pointed out, there has been a precautionary approach taken, and there are other matters, as recent as this year in terms of planning panel outcomes where levels, allowances in excess of 0.8 metres were not supported, and in fact the planning panel concluded that the appropriate action was to base the decision making on a 0.8 metre allowance for sea level rise. So I think we're very much in a space is consistent with what's the expectations about decision making within the planning scheme at present.
Thanks, Mr McConnell. Councillor Buckley.
Sorry, my mouse decided to hide itself. Thank you very much for all of that information. It's appreciated, and this is a very, very difficult planning matter, and we've all been approached by community about this, and I take this matter seriously. So I've got a couple of questions. One was taken on notice prior, which was, what is the historical flooding of this area? What information and data have we got that of this particular area flooding in the past? Because that's really, it's really critical to my decision-making process of how to move forward in this space. So that's the first part of the question. The second part is, we've also heard about the need of updating of flood mapping for our region, and we're relying on empirical data that's quite outdated at this process, and perhaps that's what the Catchment Management Authority is referring to in regards to this, to their recommendations. So how can we be assured that the relevant data is up to date enough for us to be able to make this big decision? And also, I acknowledge that we do have a housing shortage, so we're obligated by the state to address that. So there's a bit in there, but if you could just answer those two questions, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Through you, Chair. In terms of historical data, I'm not familiar with precise data in relation to this location, but what I can say is that the rationale for the 2 metre AHD 1 in 100-year flood level is actually based on historical data. So how the CMA and other agencies comes to those conclusions about appropriate heights above sea level for development to occur is in fact based on flood data. And so that modelling that is done to arrive at a 2 metre standard, and remembering that the 0.8 metre sea level rise is on top, is actually based on empirical data based on previous flood levels. I can say that I know from my own experience in the 2007 floods that which was, I think, a 1 in 50 year flood, I might be corrected on that, that the levels that were reached around the Paynesville area in the canals and McMillan Straits and other areas were about 2 metres. So that's pretty much right on what the 2 metre AHD standard that's set by the CMA. In the second part of the question, I think you referred to the flood mapping process, was that correct? So
yes.
The flood mapping process is somewhat separate to this, because what the outcome of the revised flood mapping process is to redefine the LSIO, the land subject to inundation overlay. So the data that will be used will be the same data sets, obviously, that the CMA uses in its flood modelling, but the primary purpose of that is to reset the boundaries of the land subject to inundation overlay. And in effect, all that does, which is a fair bit, is that it extends the extent of the areas that are designated as subject to flooding and brings in further planning permit triggers for those areas. So that's the difference, is that the current 2 metres plus 0.8 metre is the standard that's set for current development around the lakes and on the coast. The flood mapping process will still use those numbers, but it will update the mapping in the planning scheme to ensure that the extent of the land subject to inundation overlay actually reflects the data, which it currently doesn't. Simple way of
Okay, thank
explaining it would be there are parts of around the Gippsland lakes that would currently flood in a 1 in 100 year flood, and they're not in the land subject to inundation overlay, and that's the connection that we need to make.
Thanks, Mr. Richardson.
One further, and look, it's not relevant to this planning, but it is relevant to the area. What happened, this was raised by another councillor to me, what happened to the canal when they built the canal to all the, with their wetlands in there, and were they just...
I don't think that's relevant to this discussion.
Well, it sort of is, because it's about it's due diligence, isn't it? It's about being aware of what's happened in the past and not doing it in the future. Okay, I take that as a fair comment, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Crook.
Trying to get some of these elements clear in my head. So, happy to accept that the actual houses themselves are up on the hill at, let's say, 4 metres above, I keep saying AHD, Australian Height Datum, I think that stands for, above sea level. But the drainage infrastructure is actually at like 2 metres with the bottom end of it, that is, the lakeside end of the dam, with a wall that's about 800 mils high, separating it from the flood level, which you said you had observed in 2007. The two elements to that development, they're very much connected, aren't they? Well, one is interdependent on the other. We can't actually have the houses there without meeting the stormwater quality benchmarks that the wetlands will presumably provide. I think that's right, correct? Yep.
Yes, that's correct. The wetlands are there to provide for stormwater quantity and quality management.
But we've also had confirmed in tonight's discussions that it's actually anticipated that at some point in the future those wetlands will probably be inundated and subject to flooding, correct?
With the qualification that yes, sometime in the future, in the event of a 1 in 100 year flood event.
Sure,
that is, it won't be permanent flooding. It will be the kind of flooding that occurs now when we have a major flood.
Yes, or in fact the type of flooding that you saw back in 2007, where if the infrastructure was there as is currently proposed, it would have been lapping up against the dam wall, maybe not overtopping it. So how are we adequately addressing the future risk of inundation and storm surge to the wastewater infrastructure, which we now understand is critical to the development's capacity to exist and not adversely impact the lake, when we know that it's a freshwater system that treats the pollution from the residents, and the lake is now effectively a marine system. So when it gets inundated, it's going to be filled up with salt water, and yes, the water may dissipate quite quickly. Floods don't hang around for too long, a couple of days maybe. But have we actually made allowances for what the impact on the ecosystem processes within that wetland will be and its capacity to do that whole bioremediation process in there and fulfil its requirements under the planning scheme to treat the water, keep the lake safe, ensure that those allowances for climate change are actually being brought to bear on the planning process here? Because I'm not confident.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Cook, and through you, Chair. One thing I will point out is that currently all of the stormwater from the Fullarton Drive estate goes straight into the lake untreated. So that's what's happening at the moment. So therefore, I would say, based on the information, that yes, I agree that there will be occasions, and Mr McConnell referred previously to a VCAT decision to the actual VCAT decision in 2014 that indicated that it was acceptable for these wetland and detention basins to be occasionally inundated in the event of
that was saline water, was it?
That's correct. Yeah. So, and what I would simply add is that therefore, for 99 years out of 100, it won't be inundated.
Okay. Yeah, but can I just say too, that won't help with the case, but we also know that, let's take Lismore, for example, it had 3 1 in 100 year events in as many months. So the old 1 in 100 years, is that really the best we can do, the 1 in 100 years? I mean, that's compliant with the planning scheme is what you're saying, but Shouldn't we be taking a more precautionary approach?
I think we're getting into debate with officers here, Tom, so...
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Crook, so Councillor Uri.
Sorry, just another question. If that scenario does unfold and there is inundation of the drainage infrastructure at some point, and it needs to be repaired, the wall or the drainage, the dam itself, that would be council's responsibility to do that.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Chair. Yes, the asset management of the asset would be council's responsibility.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillor Buckley got another question.
Yes, my question is a question of process. Not that I'm preempting what the decision will be made at this point, but if the decision was not passed this evening, if it was if councillors decided to vote no to the motion, what would be the implications to council from that point forward, and what would it mean in regards to our position? What's the likelihood of what the process is from there? Sorry if I didn't word that very well, but I think the community would probably be interested to know.
Do you get the gist of that, Mr McConnell?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Chair. So if perchance one of the councillors moves the officer's recommendation and that motion was lost, then council hasn't made a decision at that point in time. And so we're still in a circumstance where there is no decision. It's not automatically refusal. It's just a case that where there is no decision. And so then the various rights and opportunities of all parties continue, and that includes, for example, the right of an applicant to seek review at VCAT.
Thank you. And if the motion was to pass, then the community has the right to take the matter to VCAT. Is that correct?
So, thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Chair. If an objector to the application was to be unhappy with the outcome, they may seek review at VCAT, or indeed if the applicant was dissatisfied with some aspects of the decision, for example, some of the conditions that are imposed, for example, they could also seek review of the matter at VCAT.
And is it normal that VCAT don't, when they have provided a ruling, that they don't provide recommendations? Because it would have been really handy if that had been the case.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. It would be, in fact, quite rare for VCAT to make recommendations in the event that they refused. And in fact, I think as has been previously outlined, VCAT turned its mind to whether or not the previous proposal could be made to be satisfactory by the imposition of various conditions to a decision, and determined that that wasn't appropriate given the complexity and the significant changes that would be required.
Thank you, Mr
McConnell. Last question.
Well, this is also a process question leading on from Councillor Buckley's. So we've just heard that if the council doesn't approve the officer's recommendation to approve the development tonight, that won't in fact be, that would lead to the potential for the developer to take the matter to VCAT under the fail to determine clause. Would I then be right, that's correct?
Potentially.
Potentially. Would I then be right in thinking if a councillor was of the view that this current proposal wasn't actually adequate, that councillor should be proposing an alternate motion to see the development not continue? I'm not quite sure if they're the right words.
So, thank you, Councillor, through you, Mayor. So, it's the case that whatever the motion is, whether it is the officer's recommendation or any other motion, if that is lost, that it is no decision. It's a no decision. It's not saying the matter is refused. There's just no decision that's been made. And so councillors will need to, if they wish to make a decision either way in relation to that, that's the motion that they need to put forward.
Thank you. I'd like to foreshadow a motion to refuse the planning decision or the application.
That's the Senate.
Through you, Chair. It can be done. However, what I would suggest is that if you are seeking for an alternate motion, essentially, then it would be preferable that there was an opportunity to ensure that the motion that was to be put was in fact appropriate and could actually be, had all the elements that it needed to be correct and technically right and so on. So I'd certainly take advice from the General Manager or Manager on this, but it would be my view that without some pre-preparation of an appropriate alternate motion, we can find ourselves with unintended consequences.
Yes, and I certainly appreciate the lateness of my intention here, and I'll be quite upfront in saying it purely results from my not adequately understanding the complexities of the process. I was under the opinion that the decision would be refused if the current proposal by officers wasn't passed, and that's clearly not the case.
So through you, Chair, specifically in making a decision to refuse a planning matter, it's quite important that the grounds for that refusal are also identified and that those grounds are properly couched in terms of the requirements of the planning scheme. And so clearly not being aware of what the motion refusal may entail and what's in Councillor Crook's mind in that respect. I just note that as a general comment, that's one of the things that needs to be very carefully considered in a motion that results in refusal of a planning application, because it's those grounds which are then the matters that are considered when the matter is taken, assuming if the matter is taken to VCAT.
Okay, I'm certainly happy to outline some clauses within the East Gippsland planning scheme that I feel that this current development doesn't comply with.
Yeah. Just go to Sonia, Councillor Buckley, from her question, please. Councillor Crook.
Yeah, look, I just want to also foreshadow an alternative motion if Councillor Crook's motion does not get up, and that would be a motion to defer. So I just wanted that to be noted, Chair.
Thank you. Just taking some advice on Councillor Crook's motion here.
I know. I apologise.
Happy to go through you, Chair. Just sought some clarification, just in terms of way forward. So, and we need to just be careful that we're not preempting anything that the council may want to do. But obviously, the other option is that the matter be deferred, so that an appropriate motion could be put forward if that was if that was the will of the council. But again, I just want to be really clear that I'm not suggesting that is what you should do. I'm simply saying that what we don't want is something on the run tonight that then has unintended consequences that actually then create a problem for the council.
Yes.
Look, can I, if you don't mind, Chair?
Yep.
I'm happy to accept, and I apologise to my fellow councillors and the officers and people present that I should have formulated such a motion prior to now. And so maybe the best way forward is for me to suggest a motion to defer the decision, and that would allow me the time needed to make sure that such a motion is appropriately worded. Or could I ask for 10, 15 minutes to craft a motion and...
Tom, I'd be happy to second your motion to defer it and give us a chance to have a look at it properly, not do it on the run. Yeah. And 10 or 15 minutes is on the run.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. All right, so having had that discussion, and noting that Councillor Buckley also foreshadowed that motion, do I have a motion to defer? Councillor Crook?
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Yeah. Could I have some clarification about how long the deferral is suggested for, please?
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillor Crook, what was your suggestion for deferral?
I would be happy with the next meeting, Chair.
Good.
I think that would be more than ample. And again, I apologise to everybody that I failed to understand the process as well as I could have.
Are you happy to accept that? Yep. All right.
Could I just check the CEO? That would give us time, would it?
I would, again, I would refer to the General Manager or Manager just to confirm that there are no other... Well, there are consequences to a deferral, as there would be any non-decision, but I'm just checking that there's no unintended consequences of that we wouldn't be aware of. And capacity to provide that at the next council meeting.
So thank you, CEO, and through you, Chair. We've outlined the general consequences about a deferral, which are in effect the same as not making a decision, as I outlined earlier. My assumption is that a motion could be properly constructed for the next meeting. However, that would depend obviously on what the matters are that are in Councillor Crook's mind, but they're matters we can step through outside of this meeting.
Good. Okay, we have a motion that's been moved and seconded.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, just a matter of clarification. Could I hear the wording, or could we have the wording up on the screen, please, just to be sure that we understand the purpose of the deferral?
Yeah. She's writing it there. Thanks, Mindy.
Would you like me to write that?
No. Okay. Vanessa's doing it now.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Yeah, no. Make sure we're getting the wording right. Yep, that's the important bit. Yep. Yeah. That's all right. If you've got L plates on you, might as well learn. There we go. Councillor Crook, would you like to read that out and make sure that's what you intend to move?
Yes, it is. That this item, 5.1.1, planning application 52022 3441 3442022/P, multi-lot subdivision and native vegetation removal 10 Fullarton Drive, Paynesville, be deferred and brought back to the council meeting to be held on Tuesday, the 5th of September 2023.
Councillor Stowe, that's the motion you seconded?
Yes, it is.
All right. Would you like to talk to the motion?
Simply to say that I feel it would be prudent for me to take more time to craft the motion that I have foreshadowed for the next meeting, rather than try and do that during the course of this meeting, not having adequately understood the process to this point, and now having to play catch up. I think the best resolution to my quandary is to see the matter deferred, so I'm afforded due time to craft that motion to the satisfaction of the requirements that are imposed upon it.
Thank you. Councillor Stowe.
Look, I support the motion. That doesn't mean I'm for or against it. It just means that I don't think we're in a position to go ahead tonight. And the last thing we need is policy on the run, so happy to second Tom's motion.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak for the motion? Anyone wish to speak against the motion? In that case, we will put the motion. All those in favour? It's carried. Okay, move on to item 5.2.1, which is the Toonalook Waters revegetation project. Ms Weigel, is that you?
Thank you, councillors. Councillors, before you this evening is a report on Toonalook Waters. As detailed in the report, Toonalook Waters was developed in the early 2000s. The development included a constructed wetland directly adjacent to a number of properties. There is evidence that a management agreement was to be put in place, identifying the required maintenance to be conducted by council, with the cost of this maintenance to be covered by landowners. However, at the time, no management agreement was formalised. While there has been ongoing general maintenance, in recent years there's been an increasing presence of taifa or bulrush, and the presence is acceptable from a water quality perspective, however is visually not attractive for some and prevents the use of the wetland for recreational activities. Officers have investigated the implications of both leaving the wetland as it is and options to remove the taifa. As identified in the report, Council do not have a formal obligation to remove the taifa from a water quality perspective, as there is no formal management agreement. Council is not obliged to move it for visual amenity. However, it is acknowledged that from a public open space perspective, improving aesthetics and supporting recreational use is a desirable outcome. The cost of revegetation is acknowledged, and while it is understood that the original intent for landowners to cover the cost of maintenance, the absence of an agreement means that individual landowners are under no obligation to contribute. The development of an agreement to fund revegetation could be developed, however it may not be feasible. It would, however, be reasonable to commence a new agreement to cover the cost of future maintenance once the revegetation works are finalised. On this basis, even though there is no formal obligation, the report before you recommends that the taifa is removed and the wetland is revegetated on the basis that an appropriate agreement is formalised for the future maintenance of the wetland. With me this evening to answer any questions of a technical nature is our Manager of Community Facilities and Open Space, Wayne Richards, and councillors before you is a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Weigel, and welcome, Wayne. Is there any questions from Councillor Crook?
Am I understanding that the recommendation is actually to implement the revegetation plan, which would constitute removal of the typha, disposal of that, and a bunch of planting? And I think I saw a figure of $120,000 in the report. If that being the case, will council need to seek currently unidentified funding for this project, and what projects are likely to be put back or not completed as a result of prioritising this work?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair. Yes, the recommendations are that the works would not be undertaken until there was a formally agreed to management plan for the ongoing management and maintenance of the revegetated areas agreed to with the landowners. And the report also identifies that there would be, the works would be done staged over a number of periods, but you're right that there would be a need to reprioritise other works to undertake this. I will hand over to Mr Richardson to provide you with a little bit more detail about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. And through you, Chair, I guess Fiona answered the majority of the question. As far as specific projects that would be put on hold, those have not been identified yet, but you're correct in that it would have a financial implication to other projects that we would be looking to do.
Councillor Uri.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr Richards. I'm just wondering, I'm pretty sure that you will have had some perhaps considerable contact with the people who live in this area already. I'm wondering what, I think what's outlined in the paper here, and thank you for the report. It's a bit like a discussion paper. We learn a lot about it, but can you please just comment on the likelihood of success of this way forward that you've outlined here?
My understanding of the actual process of revegetation and with some ongoing maintenance is expected success.
Yep.
If you're referring to the
agreement of the people,
the agreement of
yes,
yeah, the agreement of future maintenance.
Yes.
That's a difficult question, and I guess that's probably the next stage of this, as outlined in the recommendation.
Yep.
Noting, I think, within the report, the expected ongoing maintenance costs shared across properties is in the vicinity of about $3,000 a year.
Yes.
So it's not expected to be a huge cost when spread out across residents.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. John. Councillor Boyd.
That the cost to remove it is quite significant, Wayne. Has any thought been given to, and I'm not a great advocate of spraying, but is there a possibility of a safe spray that wouldn't affect the water but would actually kill off the kabungi, and once it's gone then you can do your revegetation?
I can't comment too much on the details of the potential options for removal, but I guess what I can say is just spraying and leaving the vegetation there is likely to have a negative water quality impact. So the work would actually include physical removal of the vegetation, as well as some of the sediments, and it's our understanding that the sediments would actually need to be transported as potential significant waste. So it's not as simple as just going and spraying and allowing it to die.
So if I could perhaps just add to that as well, through you, Chair. The costs are informed by some quite detailed support reports that are not appended to this report itself, but are referred to in the report. So there has been quite a lot of analysis of the type of planting, the cost of planting, how do we make sure that the wetland would continue to function as a wetland, and how to protect the Gippsland lakes while the works are going on. So there is quite a lot of science that has informed this report and the recommendations around moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Any further questions? Councillor Crook.
Beat you by a millisecond. I'm just making sure I understand this correctly. We're planning to pay $120,000 to improve the view for the residents of Toonalook Waters. The existing water quality maintenance function of the wetland is adequate, so this is an aesthetic works that are primarily about the aesthetic and the look of the place, not its capacity to treat wastewater or whatever it currently does. We're not going to undertake those works unless all the residents agree to pay for the maintenance forevermore. Is that right?
I believe that's a pretty good summary, but I'll hand over to Mr Richardson again.
Just trying to make sure I'm clear what we're asking.
Thank you, and through the chair, I think everything except for the final point. I guess as long as there is an agreement, doesn't necessarily have to be all residents, but it would essentially be a voluntary agreement to ensure that the cost of the ongoing maintenance is covered by landowners.
So, sorry, just following on from that comment then, we would have no regulatory capacity to ensure that those maintenance costs were met. That would just be a handshake or a goodwill agreement, would it? That we would then spend $120,000 on in good faith?
Thank you, and through the... You may go.
Sorry, I'll leave this to Mr Richardson to answer, and then I might add to it. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair, there is several different mechanisms that could be used depending on the number and the agreement of the residents, but there is the potential that agreement would be it would still be a written agreement, it would be a binding agreement, but the ongoing maintenance, I guess, is at a level where if the residents were to pull out of that agreement, that maintenance could actually cease. Our understanding is that with Typha being a dominant species, that it would return to the waterway, and the water quality would have I believe, based on the background and the feedback from the last couple of years, the intent would be to enter into a binding agreement from those residents.
Councillor Uri, did you?
No, I had no further questions.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. So, Wayne, if we were to do nothing and just leave it as it is, would that be okay in regards to the health and the quality of the water? And it's just a matter of some residents being unhappy that their view's impeded.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through the chair. My understanding is that from the testing that's been done, the existing water quality or the function of the nutrient stripping from the Kumbunji has maintained the water quality level. There may be a need for some maintenance in the future to continue that, but it certainly wouldn't be at the scale of a revegetation. But I guess just also adding to your question and also what Councillor Crook mentioned before, certainly the landowners directly abutting the wetland gain significantly from the views over the wetland, which our understanding was that was the initial intention. But that wetland also does fulfil a function for people in that area walking, driving over the bridge, as well as there is some public access to the waterway for some recreational activities as well. So it's not exclusive to the landowners, although it's acknowledged that, primarily the obvious benefit from the revegetation is the views.
And so at the moment, it's sort of providing privacy, not views. Anyway, look, regardless of that, there's two other questions. Were we responsible for the outbreak because of the malfunction of the pump and it was just left? And finally, if we do revegetate, will it just grow back and take over, just like, these sorts of weeds tend to do? Or can we really manage it from that point onwards with the assistance of ratepayers?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Buckley, and through the chair. I guess I'll answer your second question first, in that the understanding is the development of a management plan would allow the wetland to be maintained in that revegetated condition at the cost of the ratepayers through that agreement. And sorry, can you possibly repeat your first question?
Were we responsible for the overgrowth and outbreak because of the pump failing? There was a mention from one of our residents earlier that there was the question was raised about responsibility and that there was a pump failure and we failed to do anything about that, and therefore that's when this problem started to eventuate and proliferate. So were we responsible for the outbreak in the first place?
I think, Councillor, through you, Chair, as per my response to the question from the floor, there's no evidence of what was originally planted, so we don't know if it was the Kubunji was always there, and the pump, whilst it has broken down from time to time, it has always been repaired, and so the pump itself isn't responsible for the Kubunji. There's a number of ways that Kubunji can get into an active waterway, and it's not necessarily around having stagnant water. And indeed, my understanding from the team is that in a slow-moving wetland like this one is ideal for the growth of Kubunji. So with the pump slowly moving water around, it's ideal for the growth.
And is Kubunji a native? Excuse my ignorance. It's a native, yeah.
Yes, it is.
Councillor Stowe.
Thank you.
Councillor Stowe, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. Kubunji could be likened a little bit to rabbits on the land, couldn't it? It just spreads infinitum, and as you said, it's an ideal environment for it. If we don't do anything, will it eventually choke up the entire waterway down there?
I'll ask Mr. Richardson to answer this one.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stowe, and through the chair. My understanding is that there's specific conditions that the Kubunji needs to grow in, which is a certain depth of water, and not being exposed to dry to dry land for a particular period of time. So the answer to that is no, it wouldn't choke up entirely, but there may be some management required in certain locations. And in fact, one of the documents that the documents that we received identified that while there's certain sections where it's quite dense, having more Kubunji but more spread out could actually be of benefit. So it won't take over the entire wetland, but as I said, there may be some requirements to thin it out in certain periods to maintain flow.
Councillor Uri.
If there are no further questions, Chair, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Good. We have a seconder. No seconder? Right, Councillor Stowe, a considered seconder. Would you like to speak to it, please, Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. This has been, this issue has been live, as we well know, as we've read in the discussion paper, for a number of years. And I think what's been proposed by our officers is a reasonable way forward. I think $120,000 is a considerable amount of money, but council just about every day invests in our communities to improve people's aesthetic when they look out the window. We pay a lot of attention to how our streetscapes look and make them visually appealing and so on. I don't think this is an unreasonable investment. I think that there are some riders on this way forward, so it won't proceed unless the residents agree to it, unless there's a management plan in place and unless there is some source of funding. That's correct. I beg your pardon, Mr. Chair? You were agreeing.
I didn't mean to interject. I would take advice that the first part was enter into an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Second part was similar, but the third part was, in the meantime, go ahead with the vegetation management. Is that correct?
I draw your council's attention to part 2B of the recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
That residents are ensure that residents are clear that no works other than standard maintenance will be undertaken by council until such time as a maintenance plan is developed and agreed to by residents, including agreement to the landowners funding the ongoing maintenance costs.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I misread it, yeah.
So I think that gives us some comfort that with those things in place it would be reasonable to go forward. So I commend the recommendation to you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Urey, and sorry for the interruption.
Okay.
Councillor Stowe.
Well, truthfully, I'd sooner spend the $120,000 on the Scout Hall, but Councillor Urey has summed it up beautifully, and I do agree with what she said.
Right, anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Chair. While I agree with Councillor Urey's sentiment and also understand the frustrations felt by the residents in this location, because they clearly were told by the developer from whom they purchased these properties that they were buying lakeside properties with pictures of canoes and all that kind of stuff. In fact, you can still go online and find an ad for the development that looks like a lakeside development, and that's not, in fact, what's eventuated. I'm speaking against the motion because I have, throughout my short time in council, struggled to solicit or seek or find or push investment into natural areas managed by council. Council manages hundreds of natural areas, some of national significance. We have littoral rainforests that occur nowhere else in Victoria, that are critically endangered nationally, and we do very little to manage their environmental values. And I'm not putting the blame for that on anybody in particular, but we clearly have a bit of a funding crisis when it comes to environmental management of environmental assets, of which this is one that is already fulfilling its requirements in remediating nutrient inflows and stripping nutrients out of, collecting sediments, doing all the things it's supposed to do. This would be an investment in the aesthetics of a natural area. And I don't believe, despite understanding the importance of this to the residents there, that this is the most prudent or reasonable use of limited council resources, and that those same resources should be prioritised elsewhere into other environmental assets which are of much higher environmental significance. Thank you.
Good. Anyone wish to speak for or against? If not, we have a motion, so I'll... Oh, write a reply. Sorry.
No, I have nothing further to say. Thank you.
Sorry again, Mindy. So at that point, we will put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? and abstinence is taken as against. So at this point, I believe the chair has the casting vote. Given that I voted in favour of it, I'll cast my vote in favour of the recommendation. Thank you. We'll move on to 5.2.2, Capital Works and Major Projects Year in Review. Ms. Weigel, I assume.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I must make the apologies for our Acting Manager of Infrastructure Projects, who I'm sure would have loved to present this or be here for questions of a technical nature. It is her birthday, so we've let her off this time.
No excuse.
Councillors, as you know, we bring very regular reports to you throughout the year about the status of the Capital Works program, including 3 quarterly reports. We do not normally bring a final quarter, like a year in review report. It's usually brought to you as part of the annual report. However, given the size of the program this year, we thought it would be good to close the loop with a bit of a pictorial summary of some of the achievements of this very significant capital program. As the report before you outlines, we started with an adopted budget of $112 million, which included $54 million of carry forwards. At the end of the year, we had delivered, we had 272 projects in progress, of which 42 were completely delivered, and a number of many more were underway. We had spent $43.4 million of expenditure on the program, which is an all-time record for this council, with an additional $31.3 million of commitments. So well over $74 million worth of budget either committed or spent on the program, which again is an all-time record for us. So councillors, rather than give you lots of words, we thought it was good to give you a report which gave you lots of pictures, and that is what the attached presentation on the attached report provides you with. A bit of a summary of some of those highlights, of which we believe there are many, and some of the projects that we are continuing to deliver, and also some of the projects that we're delivering on behalf of the community. So they're not necessarily on council land, but they're of such a scale that it was the community needed some assistance to help deliver them, such as the Sarsfield Recreation Reserve and the Swifts Creek Recreation Reserve upgrades, to name but a 2. I think, however, the attachment speaks to itself, so there is a recommendation before you, which is really just to accept the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weigel. Any questions, councillors? Mindy, go on.
Okay.
I know you want to.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you for the report, and I hope we can make good use of those gorgeous pictures, because they just remind everybody of the extent and the geographical spread of some of these really major projects. I think we need to speak about them so the community really can see all the effort that council has gone to, not just delivering the projects, which of course is incredibly important, but generating the funding so that we can do the projects. And again, in circumstances which haven't been altogether easy. We all know there have been lots of headwinds to deliver these projects. So I congratulate all the officers and yourself, Ms. Weigel, for this incredible result. I do have one question. I don't mean to pick out a negative, and I can't find the page. I was just scrolling through the Malakuta Streetscape project, which is in development. I think it's one of the ones that hasn't been delivered yet, but it's in development. I've had some questions recently about how much consultation there has been with the Madra group in Malakuta about some of the elements of that project. I know there's been a project reference group very closely engaged in that project. I wonder if you would speak, please, to the collaboration that's occurred to develop the Malakuta Streetscape project.
Sure. Malakuta Streetscape project was identified, and it's been identified as a tired streetscape for a very long time. And this was seen as an opportunity to refresh it, to help bring those important tourists and visitors back to the Malakuta area as part of the revitalisation of the economy after the bushfires. It was actually funded through a regional partnership program, which invited projects to apply, so it was not a competitive grant in the same way as some of the other bushfire projects were. So it was developed through that federal funding, through the regional partnership funding. You're quite right, Councillor, there has been a lot of engagement with the community, and it's meant we've actually had to just seek a couple of extensions to the milestones and the funding agreements to allow us to really very thoroughly work through that consultation, which included having a project reference group, which we included the Malakuta and District Business and Tourism Association, the Malakuta and District Recovery Association, Friends of Malakuta, Art Space, senior citizens, the traditional owner representatives, representatives of young families, representatives of vision and mobility impaired people, youth through the Sanctuary Project, and the Halls and Recreation Committee. On top of that, we've used both our online and face-to-face engagement sessions to put out plans and receive feedback and then modify them. So we've made a range of modifications to the plans based on that feedback. The project is now, the final layout plan has been circulated and refined to address some of the vegetation constraints, and it's currently on your say. And the printed plans, we also made sure they're available at the Malakuta Service Centre. And therefore, we're just about to go out for tender to start the construction process, which will be great.
Thank you, Ms Weigel.
Thank you, Councillor Urey. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it seems like, when we first began this journey as councillors, there's been a huge amount of work that's been done and a lot of barriers put up in front of that. So I'm just commending the officers on their work. However, there is room for improvement in any organisation, and I think it's heartening to know that we're doing a review of our community consultation processes to be able to ensure that we're really listening to community, and I think the increase in regards to the Your Say page shows that that's starting to work. I really look forward to seeing the projects in design developing, and we've been made aware that there is now new processes. I think it was a 10-point management plan in regards to managing our projects. Could you just explain that briefly so that community is aware of steps we've taken to ensure that we meet our targets, because we did fall behind for a lot of reasons, and I'd just like to, I guess, foster some positive and hope in the community that we'll be able to deliver.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair. Yes, Councillor, like councils and private enterprise alike across Australia, we were met with some real challenges when we were delivering this massive program for ourselves. It was a time when we saw inflation and price escalations. We saw some prices go up as much as 30%. We saw supply issues generated by COVID, which meant supply delays for some of the componentry, especially componentry around steel and construction. We also saw floods and weather conditions that slowed our program as well. So we brought a report to the June council meeting, which outlined some of those challenges we'd faced in delivering this program, but also some of the processes that we'd put in place and some of the things that we'd refined. And there were 10 of them. Councillor, I'm not sure that I can recall them all off the top of my head, but they were things like we now do a QS assessment of all of our designs before we put them out to tender. So we're clear about the cost of them by looking at that quantitative surveying process. We are making sure we do a lot of work. We've really refined our project management software. So we've got quite sophisticated project management software that allows us to manage our projects really closely. We also do a lot of redesign. So where there was a gap between budget, especially for projects that were budgeted before those cost escalations, we did quite a bit of redesign and that's where we engaged even more with the community on those redesign processes to make sure that we were trying to bring the projects back within budget. We also were looking at alternate materials, alternate contractors, recognising that our contractor pool, whilst we've got some real strength in our contractors, it is a small pool. So looking at how we could make sure we were supporting our contractors by providing information up front and staging some of the release of our tenders so that we could try and ensure that we weren't overloading our contractors. So there are a range of other initiatives that we've put in place because, as Councillor Buckley has rightly pointed out, this is a learning experience for us about how do we to continually improve our processes so that when there are market forces or changes that are beyond our control, we've got good processes in place that allow us to adapt and mitigate them as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weigel. Any further questions, comments? In that case, we have a mover for the recommendation. Do we have a seconder? We've got Councillor Stowe and Councillor Uri as seconder. Councillor Stowe, you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair, I do. The fires of 2020 were a tragedy for our Shire. They were terrible, but the end result of all this has given us a once-in-a-generation chance to do some real work in the Shire. I think our normal turnover of budget is something in the order of 50 million, and the last 3 years I think we've turned over something like 120 million. People can say, well, not all projects have been completed, but if you'll pardon the French, we've had a bloody good go at it and been very successful with most of it. I'd just like to highlight a few. There's many, many projects. I can't. The projects, what I do like, have been spread over the entire Shire, Bairnsdale, Mallacoota, Omeo, all over the place. And a couple that particularly grabbed my attention, the World Centre up there. It's got netball, it's got soccer and it's got hockey. And 2 of those facilities are open now. And if anyone hasn't been up to have a look at them, have a look. It is just spectacular and people are enjoying them. And not only enjoying them today, they'll be enjoying them the next generation and possibly the one after as well. The Mallacoota Skate Park, there's been bridges replaced, old timber bridges. I've got an idea there might have been 16 replaced over the Shire. Other agencies can't even replace one bridge after 3 years. We've replaced 16 in a matter of months. It's a credit to the staff. Mallacoota Skate Park, I think I mentioned, and the gymnastic pavilion, it's gone from what was a pretty tired old facility out the road to something that's magnificent. I'll let Mandy talk about the lighting upgrades in the Shire, but I do note that we're going to be saving $3.5 million over the next 20 years from implementing that. And there's a few other benefits with the lighting I'm sure Mandy will touch on. But they're just a few of the things that attracted me. And I think it's been a credit to the staff, and I think that the ratepayers of East Gippsland should be eternally grateful for what's been received from state, federal government and from the local council.
Well said, Councillor Stowe.
Well, thank you.
And you highlighted a number of really important projects. I'm glad you mentioned the World Centre. It is stunning. And the lighting upgrades, of course, have been very important. I'd also like to mention the EV charging stations for our electric cars, which have been fantastic. In terms of encouraging tourism into the far reaches of our Shire, I think that's been a really worthwhile project to be out in front of the commercial operators. I think it's been very worthwhile. So, and I think I've said enough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Anyone wish to speak against the motion? In that case, I will put it to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Right, so we move along to 5.2.3, which is Krauatungalung Walk Stage 1. Again, I imagine that's Miss Weigel. Oh, sorry. Councillor White, sorry, I didn't see your hand come up.
I was merely going to point out the time, and I wonder if we should not
We got, yeah.
move motion to
Well, we might as well do it now.
fairly soon to extend the meeting. Yes.
Do it now, John. So, to extend 1 hour, is that?
Oh, I hope that's enough. We seem
So
to be
do I.
labouring a bit tonight, but I'm happy to move that we extend it for an additional hour.
Yes, Albert.
Through you, Chair, you extended the meeting by 30 minutes at the beginning for additional
That was the question time, was it? So that
Yeah, but
carries through.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So we're right till 9:30. Yes, thank you for that clarification. Good. All
Okay,
right.
that's good.
That's real good. So back to Krauatungalung. Over to you, Ms. Weigel.
Thank you, Chair and councillors. Before you is the first of our contract reports for the evening for the Krauatungalung Walk, which is a significant walk in the Lakes Entrance area that has been funded through the federal government for design and delivery of the first stage. In the first stage, there is an attachment that shows the project scope. It's from the Foreshore Park across the bridge to the Surf Club precinct. The walk has been named after traditional owners and will be a practical demonstration of respect and healing by interpreting some of the stories and developing that mutual understanding of the rich Indigenous heritage of the Lakes Entrance. And whilst not part of this contract, I would draw Council's attention to some of the complementary works that have been invested in the walk, including a large seat that was placed on the foreshore side earlier this week, which is an amazing piece of work and shows the Brian and Tuck stories of Indigenous stories from the Gunner Kurnai, with Glawak being engaged to develop those and deliver those art pieces for us, which is a great collaboration. So the contract before you is the first stage. It is fully funded with the exception of some project management costs that we are not able to claim through the grant, but it is fully funded through external federal funding. It includes a 300-metre section of boardwalk from the footbridge to the sand spit, and construction of a range of art installations, shield designs, and an additional footpath on the other side of the boardwalk, on the other side of the bridge as well. So I believe that the report before you, probably better than I, explains the project, and there is I draw your attention also to the confidential attachment, which details the tender evaluation panel's assessment of tenders and the recommendation before you for consideration. So I'm happy to take questions through you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. I understand this is actually a multi-stage project, and this is, in fact, the first of many stages, but it's the only one funded to date. In the absence of being able to procure future funding, will this stage function as a standalone project?
Thank you, Councillor Cook. And yes, it will. So the funding allowed us to design the entire walk and fund the first stage. So recognising that it's really important that each stage has some sort of destination point and performs a function in its own right, as well as being part of a broader walk if and when funding is procured for that. So yes, it takes us out to the spit where there will be further artwork and a resting place at that sand spit. It gives great views back along the arm as well. So it will be standalone in its own right.
Any further questions? If not, Councillor Buckley, you're on mute.
Happens at times, doesn't it? Look, I had to put my glasses on because the writing's really small, and I was having trouble trying to determine how much the actual artworks were costing in this project.
So,
and there were some. I thought we originally had mention of totem poles, but I can't see them either in the original design.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair. There are shield designs on the footbridge entry as part of this project, but the contract we're considering tonight doesn't include the artwork. The artwork sits outside of that. So I will draw your attention to the confidential attachment, but I won't discuss it in detail given that we're in a open meeting at present. But it does give you a little bit more. It shows that the total budget, and then it shows the budget that we're considering allocating to this contract tonight. So on page 4 of 8 of the confidential attachment, and yes, you have to do expand it up a bit. It does give you both the overall budget for the project in that little pie graph, and then how much is being spent in this particular contract.
Thank you, Ms. Weigel.
Good. Any further questions? So we have a recommendation. Would someone, Councillor Yuri?
Yes, I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
Someone wish to second it? Councillor Crook. Councillor Yuri, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes.
Oh, hang on,
I
you've got
need
to populate it. Yes, sorry.
So this is the motion, if I could fill in the gaps.
Yes, sorry.
So point number 2, that Council accepts the tender submitted by Design Co Builders Proprietary Limited for contract 2023-1491 Krauatungalung Walk Stage 1 for the contract amount of $1,550,680 exclusive of GST.
Thank you. Now, would you like to read that and make sure that that's what you just
Up here.
moved, please?
Zato. Yes. Design Co-Builders. Yes, that's correct. Thank
Councillor
you.
Cook, you happy to second that?
Yes, thank you, Chair, I am.
Right. Councillor Yuri, will you wish to speak to it?
Just to endorse the project, fantastic project for Lakes Entrance. I do remember being down there in Lakes Entrance one time with some First Nations people standing on the lakeside there, and the comment was made that you could drive into this town and not know about Aboriginal presence or history. And I think this will go some way to changing that. And I really look forward to seeing it delivered. I think it'll make a wonderful asset to the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crook, do you wish to speak to it?
Only to reiterate what Councillor Yuri has said. This is a great project. It's coming at considerable expense, but that's being met by another echelon of government, so it's a good partnership.
Good, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak for the motion? Anyone against the motion? In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. So we'll move on to 5.2.4, which is curb and channel replacement on various roads in East Gippsland. Back to Ms. Weigel.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, from one extreme to another, really, in terms of contracts, this is one of our standard contracts. It is a panel contract based on a schedule of rates, and it is a multi-year contract. Obviously, with almost 3,000 kilometres of roads, and almost half of that being sealed roads, and a large percentage of that requiring curb and channel, having contractors who are able to assist us with the replacement of curb and channel is an important part of our road maintenance and road renewal program. So therefore we have gone out for tenders to seek contractors who are able to assist us with that quite specialised work. Recognising the size of the Shire, we've gone out with 5 different areas and sought quotes or schedule of rates for all of those, recognising that some contractors may prefer to only service one part of the Shire or another. So there's a schedule of rates for Bairnsdale and Lakes Entrance, one for Omeo, Benambra, Enstay and Sweffs Creek, one for Orbost and Buchan, one for Can River and Malakuta, and one for Bendock. So the results of the tenders received and the tender evaluation panel assessment are again provided to you as a confidential attachment 1. And there are a range of recommendations in there for Council to consider for the awarding of the panel of schedule of rates contracts. So that means we can have more than one contractor per area. And then it's up to availability and schedule of rates when we actually seek the works. So I'm happy to take any questions on this recommendation and the report before you, but I think I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Probably on there. Good, thank you, Ms Weigel. Anyone got any questions on this? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. So this is a slightly different approach than what we've normally had in the past. Is that correct? And it sort of allows council more of an opportunity to be able to make decisions based on geographical location and availability. Is that correct?
That's right, Councillor, through you, Chair. Yes, this is we've always had a schedule of rates contract, but we now have a panel which allows us to have multiple suppliers, which means that we can use all the expertise of our contractors across the Shire, and it means if a contractor is busy doing work for, say, Department of Transport or a private developer, we can then reach out to another contractor, and it doesn't slow down our program.
And do we have enough contractors in the pool to be able to service the needs of our Shire? And how does the process deal with new applicants? Do we provide space for that? How does the panel provide space for new incoming providers?
So thank you, and again through you, Chair. So thank you, Councillor. Great questions. So it is quite a specialised field. So we are quite reliant on a small number of contractors, but we believe that they have capacity. The contract, we wouldn't normally reopen the panel during that 3 years unless something untoward changed. A couple of the contractors decided to close their business, or there was obviously not enough supply, or a number of new contractors came in that could fill a supply shortage. So very occasionally we would open the panel during that period and go through the same sort of process again. But however, we also have the opportunity to take on additional, I'm just looking for it, it's in, there are 2 extensions, so if you look at recommendation 4, there are 2 extension options. If the panel wasn't meeting our needs and wasn't recognising the contractors that are in the area at that time, we wouldn't seek to extend use those options. We would go back out to a full tender.
So it provides stability for the contractors that are in the panel at present for 3 years, but there are some some processes in place to be able to negate issues if they arise.
That's right.
Yeah.
It provides stability for contractors and also for council, because we know roughly what our pricing is moving forward for the next 3 years.
Okay. Thank you, Ms Weigel.
Thank you. Any further questions? In that case, we have a recommendation. Would someone like to move that? Oh, Sonia, you're moving? Good, thank you. We got a seconder? Councillor Uri. Good. Now you've got to populate it. Sonia, have you got the appropriate thing? You're on mute.
Vanessa, could you possibly just quickly send that through to me in an email? I apologise, councillors. My screen's just gone blank for where I had that information. I do apologise. Bear with me one moment. Are you able to send that through, Vanessa? Or perhaps maybe another councillor, if I'm not, I think we should be right. Apologies,
It's
Chair.
on its way, Sonia. Just licking the stamp.
Technical difficulties.
You knew what a stamp was.
Okay, I haven't received it. Okay. And here we go.
If you just run through the names, probably is all we need.
Okay, so the council receives and notes this report and attachments pertaining to the report, accepts tenders submitted by Design Co-Builders Proprietary Limited.
No, wrong
Oh,
one.
no, they sent me the wrong one.
Yes, yeah, we're on.
You just sent me the wrong one. Oh, comedy of errors.
You've got to scroll down, Sonia.
Oh, okay. Here we go. That council receives and notes the report and all the attachments pertaining to this report, accepts tenders submitted by Cranes Asphalting and Bitumen, Sealing Proprietary Limited, Fowler's Asphalt Proprietary Limited, Orbos Civil and Civic Proprietary Limited, R&M Contracting Gippsland Proprietary Limited. Is that enough, Chair?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay.
So now that's on the screen. Could you just check it? And Councillor Uri, could you also check that that's what you seconded? Good, thank you. Councillor Buckley, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just briefly to say that I think that this, as Ms Weigel points out, this gives some security for the contractors to be able to work within the next 3 years. It's an interesting process to see it go forward, and I will look forward to being able to be guided by officers to how successful it is. And I will be looking forward to seeing excellent work provided for ratepayers' money by these contractors in the future.
Thank you.
Very, very safe conscious. I think we need really good curb and channels to keep our ratepayers safe so they don't trip and fall.
Councillor Uri, all right. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? No one else want to speak for the motion? Councillor Crook.
Curb and channel, something you don't think about very often, but now, Trevor, I'm sure it is exciting to some. A very wise person once told me that there were 3 important rules to consider when building roads, and they were drainage, drainage, and drainage. Curb and channel forms a critical element to road drainage, and so I'm very pleased to see this report come to us and recommend it for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. All right. So no one else wishes to speak for or against, so at that point I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. So we'll move on to 5.2.5, which is the replacement of Reedy Creek Bridge Ensay. Ms Weigel.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, before you is the first of two bridge contracts that we're considering this evening. Reedy Creek Bridge is located in Ensay South. It's a single-lane timber bridge that provides an important link between Ensay and the farming properties in the surrounds. Recent bridge inspections identified cracking and rotting of the bridge timbers, so it's very important that we replace this bridge. In the interim, to remain open, a 15-tonne load limit was placed on the bridge. Councillors, this project went through our normal tender processes. There is a confidential attachment associated with the report, which outlines the recommendation and the considerations of the tender evaluation panel. I'm happy to take any questions, though I would note that I don't have my technical support with me this evening, so please don't make the questions too technical. Thank you.
In that case, Councillor Crook.
Measurements in metres is fine. Any idea what the rough span of this bridge is?
From one bank to the
It's a 3-span bridge, so it's quite a...
So 3 by 3. Is each span 3 or 5?
I'm looking at my colleague who's an engineer next to me. A chemical engineer, but it's about, it's about 3 by 3 metres, so.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Thank you for your untechnical question. Anyone else got any questions? Councillor Buckley?
So this is an important bridge to be replaced. Can you just explain the reasons why that's the case? And because it comes at a substantial cost. Bridges, they often make my mouth fall open when I look at the amount that it costs to build a bridge. And the final part of my question is the repurposing of materials. Can you just explain what happens to the materials once they've been, of the wooden bridges once they've been taken down? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, bridges are always one of our expensive items. We started our bridge replacement program back in 2016 when we had over 100 timber bridges still in our asset register, of which many of them were nearing end of life. So as they get nearer to end of life, there are significant maintenance costs. And at the time, we're spending over $1.5 million a year just in maintenance, not with replacements. So we've undergone quite an intensive program focusing on replacing our timber bridges, recognising that this brings down the maintenance costs considerably. Replacing them with concrete structures also means that they're much more resilient to fire, flood, and that they are designed for a 100-year life. So we're getting towards the end of the program. The bridges that we have now mostly service the agricultural community. Therefore, having load-limited bridges are a real restriction for those when you think about transporting stock and fodder and the like across our road network. To augment the costs, because as bridges are expensive, we have been very successful in applying for funding through the Bridge Replacement Program, which is a federal program. This year we received funding for 6 bridges, which I think was the most, 6 or 5?
5.
6, sorry, the CEO was giving me a funny look, I thought I got it wrong. 6 bridges, which was by far the most bridges by number funded across Australia. So we're very successful because we have a strong, well-designed bridges that we put through that program. So for this particular bridge, about a third of the funding came through the federal program, which certainly supplements the costs and means that we can continue to roll out our program. In terms of the materials, we did go through quite an extensive investigation of what happens with the materials and repurposing of those. What we've found is, in terms of ratepayer expense, it was adding considerably to the cost of the bridge to remove the timbers. So we now include that as part of the contractor specifications, that they're to remove the materials. A lot of them they then repurpose and on-sell into the community. So you would see whether that's for firewood, whether that's repurposed for, in better ways than that. Depends really on the condition of the materials that are coming out at the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, we have a recommendation. Do we have a mover? Councillor Uri, Councillor Crook just beat Councillor Buckley. So would you like to populate that, please?
Certainly. So that Council number 2 accepts the tender. That Council number 2 accepts the tender submitted by Tambo Constructions Proprietary Limited for contract 2023-1582, replacement of Reedy Creek Road Bridge, NSA, for the contract amount of $948,019, exclusive of GST.
Thank you. Is that what you've just moved?
948. Yes, correct. Thank
Councillor
you.
Crook, you happy with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Uri, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, just to endorse the motion to my fellow councillors. Interesting, you were speaking about the recycled materials, Councillor Weigel. I remember at a time many years ago when we were building our library and we were seeking to get some timber from our bridges to go into that library, and I'm actually not sure that it ever did, but it would have been a great use of timber from our regions. Anyway, that's a little bit beside the point. I'm very happy to move the motion for Reedy Creek Bridge.
Thanks, Councillor Uri. Councillor Cook, do you wish to speak? No, thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? No? Anyone else wish to speak for the motion? That time. Councillor Buckley.
I'll keep it brief. Just to say that the importance of good bridges for our agricultural sector is an imperative, and also for the safety for community when they need to exit from bushfire events or for whatever reason. So I fully support this and thank the officers for taking care of a lot of our remote communities by providing these the necessary wherewithal to implement the process of providing these bridges. So I fully support the motion.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak for or against? In which case I will put the motion. All those in favour? Which is unanimous. So from one bridge to the next bridge, replacement of Little River Road Bridge, intake. Ms Weigel.
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Chair. Yes, our second bridge, and look, much the same in terms of the reasons why this contract is coming to you. It is another one of our bridges, but in that north end area, so not far away, which when inspected recently showed signs of stress fractures, and therefore there was a requirement to replace this bridge as soon as we could, because it currently has a 15-tonne load limit on it. This is a smaller bridge, Councillor Crook, a single-span bridge, but again has received significant funding. This time over 2/3 of the funding has come through the Federal Bridge Replacement Program. But again, as Councillor Buckley has just mentioned, a really important bridge for that farming community for a whole lot of reasons that we've discussed in relation to the earlier contract. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. There is a recommendation in the confidential attachment which details the tender evaluation panel's assessment of the tenderers and their recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Any questions? No? Oh, Councillor Uri?
Sorry, just a quick one. Ms Weigel, do you know how long this bridge has had the load limit on it for? Just approximately.
The load limits were placed on them this year, so
Yes,
within our
right.
most recent inspections. The wet years we've had have really deteriorated some of our last remaining timber bridges, so it meant that we got some surprises when we did those inspections, and that's why we've brought some more bridges into this year's program.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any further questions? If not, we have a recommendation. Does anyone wish to move that? Councillor Buckley. Seconder, please. Councillor Crook. Now you've got to populate again, Councillor Buckley.
Yes, so this, the council receives and notes the report and all attachments pertaining to this report and accepts the tender submitted by Jarvis Norwood Constructions Proprietary Limited. And do you need the amount?
Yes, the amount, please.
$472,330, exclusive of GST.
Thank you. Now, could you just reread that to make sure that that's what you just moved, please?
You want me to reread that?
No, just, is that what's
yes,
got?
Yes, it is,
yeah, good, thank you. Councillor Crook, you're happy with
Yes, it is, Chair. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Buckley, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I do indeed. This is an important little bridge because I think it's one of those ones that takes you to and from the pub. Every little town, you know, that's a meeting place. To be able to get to the pub's pretty important, and we need to support those sort of places. So and also the NSA community is a very small community. It's one that's it's lost its footy team a while back, which has made it, you know, it's a real concern when you lose your football team that the town you know, starts to need more support. And they're an incredible little community who are excellent at farming and producing in their agricultural sector, and a really nice group of ladies who support each other and regularly meet at the pub. So I just want to fully support this motion and the community of Ense.
Thank you. Councillor Crook?
Oh, no, just to endorse what Councillor Buckley has already said.
Right. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Anyone else wish to speak for it? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Which moves us on to 5.2.7, Green Waste Processing and Removal Services, and I welcome Nathan, I see on there. So is this you, Ms Weigel, or Nathan?
I'll introduce you, but I've got technical support for this one, so which is great. So councillors, as we know, green waste is an important part of our waste service, which means that we need to, not only do we receive a lot of green waste, but we need to be able to mulch or process that green waste and remove it from 10 of our waste transfer station sites to more appropriate locations. We have a current contract that expires in September, so therefore we're seeking to re-tender this. Again, it is a schedule of rates contract. The initial term of the contract is for 2 years, which will be effective from September. And then there are 2 further extension options for up to 12 months each, which can be undertaken at Council's sole discretion. Councillors, like all of our other contract reports, this has a confidential tender evaluation panel attachment, which takes you through the technicalities and the details, both of the budget and also the considerations of the tenders, and provides you with the panel's recommendation. And as we've noted, Nathan is with us, Nathan Mazuka, our Manager of Sustainability and Waste, to take any questions of a technical nature. Thank you.
Good. Any questions? Councillor Stowe, then Councillor Crook.
Nathan, I noticed we've only got one tenderer. No one else interested?
So,
Thanks for the question, Councillor. Fiona.
I might just remind councillors that the number of tenderers is part of our confidential attachment. However, in a general term, when we only have a limited number, perhaps one or more or two, we undertake an evaluation that looks at market prices, that looks at current contracts, and so we still evaluate these, but we take into consideration some of those other market forces, as well as what we've been paying for the service previously. So I would draw your attention to page 2 of the attachment, which gives a summary value for money statement, which provides councillors with some comfort that the assessment has considered, when there are only limited numbers of contractors, tenderers, that we've considered that and looked at that, the tender submission based on market estimates and a range of other services. So sorry to jump in there, Councillor and Nathan, but just wanted to...
Thank you for that very good answer.
Thank you.
Councillor Crook.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ms Weigel and Nathan. Am I right in thinking that this is a contract to mulch and transport our green waste from various transfer stations across the region, but in the not too distant future this service will be replaced with another that will see us processing this material in-house, and that there's no or limited overlap, I guess? I've just had concerns expressed to me that the green waste is going out to tender rather than being managed in-house, and my understanding is that that may be the case, but that's only an interim measure, and our longer term aspiration is to be processing this material on site in Bairnsdale.
So I'm happy to hand that question over to Mr Mazuka to answer.
Thanks for the question, Councillor, and through you, Chair. Firstly, I think your observation in terms of where we're planning to get to is certainly the in-house processing of green waste material into a product that has greater value, and the time frame of that initial 2-year term has been lined up, we hope, with the opening of that new facility. In terms of the need for mulching and transport services, you would appreciate, given the distances and the need for still bringing that material into a central location, being our Bairnsdale Regional Landfill, I expect there still will be a need for mulching on some of those further sites, basically just to get the volume. Obviously, carting a large container with material that hasn't been mulched means you're moving less. So I think there will be still a need for this service in connection to a central facility at Bairnsdale. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Did you have a question?
No, I haven't.
No. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you did. Sorry, I've lost track. Councillor Buckley.
No, Chair. Councillor Crook, he asked a similar question.
Oh, yeah, good.
So I suppose I just to make sure that I heard right, we're saying that in 2 years, so 2025, we should have our system up and running, which is excellent news, because I thought it was going to be 5 years in the last estimate. So to know that it's going to be happening in 2 years is really comforting. Thank you, Nathan.
Good. Any further questions? If not, we have a recommendation. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Crook. And could we have a seconder, please? Councillor Yeri. Could you be able to populate the boxes, please?
Yes, that Council 1 receives and notes this report and all attachments pertaining to this report. 2, accepts the tender submitted by Green Care Mulching Proprietary Limited, ATF, the Norton Development Trust for contract 2023 1566, green waste processing and removal services for the tendered schedule of rates as shown in confidential attachment 1 for an initial period of 2-year term.
Good, thank you. Could you just check the screen and make sure that that's...
Yes, points 3 through 5 as I understand them.
And Councillor, you're happy with that? What, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just to say that the mulching and transportation of green waste for further processing is an important part of our overall waste management strategy. The previous approach whereby green waste has either been buried or transported vast distances outside of the region is a suboptimal outcome, and this is a step in the right direction to improve those processes, which ultimately will end up with us processing most of our green waste in Bairnsdale for a much higher value return to the community and a better outcome for the environment.
Thank you. Councillor Uri?
Thank you. Just a sort of a not so related comment, but this is the 5th contract we have let tonight, and just a comment to say that that's tremendous. The amount of work that's getting done out in the community on behalf of council is fantastic. So very happy to endorse the motion.
Good.
Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak against the motion? No? Anyone else for the motion? In the absence of anyone wishing to speak, I'll put the motion to the vote. So all those in favour? Carried unanimously. It's now 9:15 and we've still got 4 items to go. So I would propose that we need to extend the meeting by a further 30 minutes. So if someone would like to move that, Councillor
I'm happy to move
Councillor
that
Stowe.
motion that we extend the meeting by 30 minutes.
Right.
Mr. Chair.
You wish to speak to the motion?
It looks like we need another 30 minutes.
Yeah, right. No, all right. In that case, I will put it, that motion to the vote. So all those in favour of extending for 30 minutes? So that's... Oh, right. I didn't think John was in favour for a minute. Probably not, but we're going to have to. All right. Thank you for that. So we'll move on now to 5.3.1, Value Averaging Mechanism Local Government Rates Discussion Paper. And it looks like Alba gets a say for the night.
Indeed. Thank you, Chair. Councillors, before you is a report seeking your endorsement of the feedback submission at Attachment 1 to the Valuation Averaging Mechanism Local Government Rates Discussion Paper. The Victorian Government has developed a discussion paper on local government rates, which is focused on valuation averaging. The discussion paper stems from the 2020 Local Government Rating System Review, which recommended consideration of the merits of a valuation averaging mechanism for local government rates. The valuation averaging mechanism would involve annual valuations for the current year and a number of previous years for a property being averaged for rating purposes for the current year. Officers have prepared a feedback to the discussion paper, and we're now seeking endorsement to submit that feedback by the due date of the 31st of August. The officer recommendation is on page 160 of your agenda. With me this evening is Ms Liz Collins, Manager Finance, to address any questions of a technical nature. The report is presented for Council's consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
Sorry, just a small matter. It's actually on page 260, the recommendation.
Good.
Thank you.
Councillor Buckley, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And through you, just a very quick one in regards to the process that we've gone through. Would Liz be able to explain that there was quite an extensive review done on rates and proposals put forward? This was just one part of the proposal. And I'm just seeking her opinion in regards to whether there was better proposals put forward in that review that haven't been put to council from her recollection, and is there anything that we can do to advocate to have other perhaps better proposals put forward?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. The review, the rating review, 2020 rating review, that report included quite a number of recommendations that were then presented to the Victorian Government. There were only a small number of those recommendations that were supported by the state government. This one being one of them, to further explore the merits of a valuation averaging mechanism. In terms of other alternate rating, I'll call them mechanisms as well, very little included in the paper itself, the review paper, and I guess that probably in itself may highlight it's very difficult, the complexities of looking at other rating or mechanisms to use to determine the rates for each property within the municipality. I guess from, in answer to your question in total, this is just one of, I think, a small number of those recommendations that has been followed up by the state government. And as you can see, the complexity of this particular proposal, it probably is not a mechanism that would provide further clarity or simplicity to the ratepayer compared to their current valuation process and distribution of rates. I don't know if I've covered everything there, Councillor Buckley, but please just...
Yeah, no, look, it's complex and you've done a very good job. I think we've had a pretty good briefing on this and it was pretty evident where it fell out in the mix. So thank you for your explanation then.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, we've got a recommendation. Would someone, Councillor Crook? Got a second to Councillor Uri. Councillor Crook, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Sure, just to say that you know, we've certainly explored this as a potential mechanism of use, and there's a range of recommendations in the officer's report that we're seeking to endorse here. Ultimately, we found that it's not really fit for purpose for us to actually implement the system as suggested. Would be fairly technical, very difficult for ratepayers to understand or for us to explain on rate notices. The premise that we could average valuations across some years could be perceived as being a good thing. If your valuation was rising significantly and it was averaged, then you would in fact pay less than if it wasn't been. But the same is also true that if your valuation had gone down and it was being averaged, you would continue to pay the same. So there are pros and cons to this approach, but on balance, we've decided to endorse the officer position that it's not actually a viable alternative to our current system, and it wouldn't represent any kind of improvement for the ratepayers.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Chair. Liz, thank you for the paper and for helping us to explore this as a potential option. And we have seen it in briefing, as you said, Councillor Buckley, and had a chance to ask questions about it and so on and further explore it. I appreciate the fact that we've done this, just gone through this as an exercise to explore whether it would possibly be a better system for our community. And I agree that the conclusion, for me anyway, is definitely there's no advantage in doing this. But the fact that we have done and hopefully will continue to look for alternatives that might better suit the community in terms of a rating system. I think that's a good thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak against the motion? Anyone wish? Anyone? Not anyone else? Anyone else wish to speak for it? All right, in the absence of that, we'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. So we'll move on to 5.3.2, endorse Council Plan 2021 to 25 Action Plan 2023-24.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, yes, as you point out, councillors, before you is a report seeking adoption of the annual action plan for this current financial year for implementing the Council Plan 2021 to 25. The action plan identifies the actions the organisation will undertake to implement the Council Plan and the strategies during the current financial year. The action plan also identifies major initiatives that will be undertaking in this current year, which are shown in the report. The progress of the major initiatives, along with all the actions in the action plan, will be reported to Council on a quarterly basis, and then will be made available to the community on Council's website. And this is a way we can demonstrate our commitment to transparency to the community. The report is presented for Council's consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Uri and then Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. When we had a look at this in detail in the briefing recently, I know there was a question about a couple of the initiatives which weren't completed in the previous action plan, and I wondered how they're accounted for in the new action plan, please.
So in the report, on the second page of the report, we've provided a status of the of those initiatives, where they're up to, and if they translate across into the current proposed action plan.
Terrific. Thank you.
Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit tired because we are 9.5 hours into this day. So, did you state that there was accountability for the budgetary expenses of the action plan that would be provided to community? Is that what you said, Alba? I'm just seeking clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, for the question through you, Chair. The progress against the action plan is reported quarterly to Council, and then information provided to the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. In the absence of questions, we have a recommendation. Would someone like to move that, please? Could be here till midnight. Councillor Uri, we got a seconder. John, are you scratching or are you moving? Well, was it moving?
I put my hands down.
In that case, Councillor Crew.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Councillor Uri, you wish to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, look, it is a bit of a shame that we've got this in the agenda at the end of the meeting. I mean, I know it can't be helped. We've had a lot of other things on the agenda this evening, but the annual action plan is a major piece of work which outlines the work, the critical work of council for the next 12 months. So it's something that needs to be, taken seriously. And I mean, I'm not saying that we're not taking it seriously, but I would have liked to have more energy too to discuss it with my fellow councillors this evening. But we have seen it before. That's great. So I appreciate that we've got this in front of us, and I hope the community will follow along our work for the next 12 months and see us achieve some of these great initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crook.
Just to say, this is where the rubber hits the road. We identified all these things in our council plan, and this is the action part of it where we see them implemented. So good stuff. Happy to endorse it.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Buckley.
Yes, this might come as a bit of a surprise because basically the majority I see of the action plan is very good, very good. However, I can't support the action plan at this time because of the following reasons. And I guess whilst the pursuit of net zero emissions is for some perhaps a noble goal, there are valid concerns regarding the lack of comprehensive cost analysis associated with such initiatives. So without a detailed assessment of the financial implications, just blindly committing to a net zero emissions plan can lead to unintended consequences. And I guess the absence of a clear cost analysis fails to consider potential economic burdens on ratepayers, businesses and local communities. So moreover, the feasibility of transitioning to the geothermal energy, which is in this action plan, and I still am not convinced that I know enough about it. It should be critically examined. And while geothermal energy has the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, its implementation requires substantial upfront investments in infrastructure, exploration and technology. These costs may outweigh the short-term benefits, particularly for local councils operating under constrained budget. So in conclusion, while the intention to achieve net zero emissions is sometimes considered controversial, proceeding without a thorough cost analysis and feasibility assessment could burden ratepayers, hinder economic growth and result in inadequate emission reductions. A more balanced and pragmatic approach is necessary to ensure sustainable and economically viable environmental initiatives. So that's what I've got to say to support my no vote for this action plan.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak for the motion or against the motion? In which case I will put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That is a tied vote. So casting vote comes down to me for the second time tonight, and I'll vote in favour. Is that a record?
Through you, Chair, can I please call for a division?
You can call for a division. So all those who are in favour, please raise their hand again. Councillor Uri, Councillor Allen, Councillor Crook. Those against, Councillor Stowe, Councillor Buckley, Councillor White. And the Chair cast a vote in favour as a casting vote. Right, thank you. We'll move on to 5.3.3, Municipal Association of Victoria, October 23, State Council meeting motions. Again, Elder, thank you.
Getting close, thank you. Through you, Chair. Councillors, before you is a report seeking approval of the proposed motions to be submitted for the State Council meeting of the Municipal Association of Victoria for their October 2023 meeting. The next MAV Council is seeking submissions of motions. Council has identified 2 issues as potential motions to present to that State Council meeting. They are state government leadership in planning scheme amendments to incorporate updated flood mapping, and Victorian government responsibility for education-related infrastructure. The motions of the wording of the motions are detailed in attachments 1 and 2, and with me today, this evening I should say, is Acting Manager Governance Janelle Skipworth, who is able to address any questions of a technical nature. Thank you Chair.
Councillors, any questions? Councillor Crook.
In relation to the first motion, the flood mapping, that's substantively different to the work we learned of earlier today in regards to the land subject to inundation.
Thanks, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor. Essentially, it's the same. Information. So we briefed you earlier on the project we have to look at the flood mapping and conversion of that into the planning scheme in whichever tool it is, land subject to inundation and urban floodway and various other tools within the planning scheme. This proposed motion would be advocating that is a matter that, in terms of what's quite a detailed process of getting that into the planning scheme, given the technical nature of this matter, it's a matter that's best led by state government, but that's not the current circumstance.
Yes, okay, thank you, understood.
Good. Any further questions? All right, in the absence of questions, we have a motion. Would someone like to move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Crook. Councillor Stowe. Councillor Crook, would you wish to speak to the motion?
Just briefly to say, it's important that we continue to advocate to other echelons of government and decision makers through the Municipal Association of Victoria, who represents us in some of those forums. These two motions address some key costs currently being met by our council that we take the view should be met by the state government. And so this is an attempt to see them pay for what we are currently being made to pay for.
Councillor Stowe.
Quite right, Councillor. Cost shifting.
Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Anyone else for the motion? In the absence of that, we will put the motion to vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. So we'll move along to 5.3.4, adoption of internal audit plan 23 through to 26.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, before you is a report seeking your consideration and approval of the proposed internal audit plan for the next 3 years, 2023 to 26. The plan has been developed and endorsed by the Audit and Risk Committee in accordance with its charter. It's also been informed by a review of Council's current and past internal audit plans, Council's Enterprise Strategic Risk Register, integrity agency reports, consultation with council officers and council's internal auditor. A total of 4 potential internal audit areas have been included for each of the 3 years. Also with me this evening is Acting Manager Governance, Janelle Skipworth, who was available to address any questions of a technical nature. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Albert. Any council questions? Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, look, my question is around I'm fully supportive of the internal audit process, first and foremost, because it's an imperative for to ensure that we do our due diligence and provide good governance. But my question is around procurement policies. When we do internal audit plans, how are those sorts of issues looked at, and how does the process, do the checks and balances in regards to that specific area?
Through you, Chair, I'm not entirely sure I understand your question. If the question is about the service provider who undertakes the internal audits, I can address that, which
Yes,
is... Yes. So earlier on this year, Council approached the market and undertook a procurement process to identify an internal auditor for a set period of time, and that was concluded and reported to the Audit and Risk Committee, and also through a council briefing to the councillors.
And yet I probably didn't explain my question well. So my question was, in the audit process, once the procurement process of the auditor is established,
yes,
how is the spotlight put on our procurement processes? What sort of checks and balances are put in place so that we mitigate risk?
So you may see on page, and every year in this particular proposed plan, we have procurement down as one of the aspects that the internal auditor would examine, and we, with the internal auditor, create a scope of work for that, and in agreement with officers and the internal auditor work through that scope of work, which may include examining the efficacy of the policy and the procedures, perhaps doing a sample check of some of the procurements at different levels of cost and risk and scale, and then providing some recommendations to council based on the outcomes of the examination. But without an agreed scope, that is just an estimate, I suppose, Councillor Buckley, of what could be included in that type of internal audit. I hope that addressed your question.
Certainly did. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Councillor Uri.
Thank you. I'm wondering if this internal audit program is endorsed by council this evening, is that then fixed in place? What happens if an issue arises that comes to the attention of the Audit and Risk Committee and they want to make some changes? Does that just have to come back to council again?
There are, feel free to join if you wish, through you, Chair, there are a number of additional suggested topics that the organisation can use as a focus for an internal audit, and it would depend on budget. So the organisation essentially could do as many as we think necessary within budgetary allocations. If there was a significant change to what we are putting forward here for you this evening, it may be prudent for us to bring that back if it was taking something out. I thought we can add, but that would be my response. I hope that addressed your question. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Yes, thanks. Alba, there's, I think, dot point 3 and dot point 4 or thereabouts, is about it will be examined annually, yet you've put in there that the CEO may make adjustments to that. Will the annual would stay there? Would the CEO's involvement be if there was a need to bring something forward during that 12-month period of time before another review was undertaken? Is that how the CEO's involvement would be?
Yes, thank you, Councillor White, and through you, Chair. The intention there is to put forward to councillors that across the 3-year period we would look to do the proposed internal audit plan, but as you say, we may need the flexibility to move the timings around depending on internal or external changes to council's circumstance, without having to bring that back to council to seek a resolution to do so. It would be at the CEO's. We're proposing that it's at the CEO's discretion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, we have a recommendation. Would someone amend, Councillor Uri, sorry. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Stowe. Councillor Uri, you wish to speak? To the motion?
No, I think this is quite a procedural step, really. I think it's been developed very well, and it's great to have the rationale included in the report as to why the Audit and Risk Committee have identified those as being important things to explore. Very important work of the Audit and Risk Committee, so happy to endorse this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Stowe doesn't wish to talk. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? No further. Anyone else want to speak for the motion? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, to reiterate Councillor Uri's sentiments, I think to ensure legislative and good governance compliance is just a cornerstone of what we do as councillors, and ensuring that we have the financial performance reporting gives me comfort as a councillor to know that we've got eyes on how we're operating. And also, I guess, the risk management aspect on our strategic risk is really important. So I expect that this internal audit will set us up very well into the future, and I'm sure that if there are any problems identified, that they'll come to us in with expedience. So I fully support the motion.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak either against or for? No? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Which is unanimous. Thank you. Which moves us on to item 6, which is urgent business. There is none. Confidential business, there is none. So at 9:45, I will declare the meeting closed and thank everyone for their attendance, and also our officers, because by the time I got here, they've been on the job for about 14 hours, so thank you.